about you?
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Bond. James Bond. Oh, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British hand up, sir.
Welcome to James Bond Radio. News, reviews, and discussion of all things 007.
Pussy.
As you can see, I have no problem with female authority.
Oh, pipe down, 007.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Hello and welcome to podcast 25 of James Bond Radio. My name is Chris Wright and I've got my good buddy and still US-based friend, Tom Sears over there. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing very well, man. You know what today means, don't you? Today means we've actually made more podcasts than Eon have made Bond films.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah.
I think that means we're on the way up. What do you reckon?
I think so, yeah. It's about time Barbara gave us a call, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, I've got a number. She just doesn't answer me. But there we go. Never mind. So you're sounding a lot better than last time. Is your cold all gone and all that sort of
Yes, absolutely. If you remember from last time, I was suffering with a bit of man flu and it's all gone. I was just spent about a week in bed moaning while the missus came and looked after me, which was nice.
That's good.
And but I'm back on firing on all cannons, or whatever the saying is. It's all good.
Glad. I bet she's happy for that as well.
Indeed. How about you? How was Barcelona?
Barcelona was epic. It was really good. I had like a few mates over there, so I went to see them, which was cool. Obviously, it wasn't a previous Bond location, but whenever you go somewhere, if Bond hasn't been there before, your mind's eye is looking out for potential locations. You're like, oh, okay, what might work? And there was a lot of good things going for it. There are these cool little sort of narrow alleyways, which would be good for a foot chase or a motorcycle chase or something like that. And then they've got loads of cool locations, which I stuck a few photos on the Facebook page. So yeah, I think it'll be good.
You know what's funny? That's another one of those places where like. I'm astonished thinking back that Bond hasn't been to Rome before on the screen.
Yeah,
and Barcelona
Rome
is another one of those cities that would be a prime location, and it's kind of crazy that he hasn't been there before.
Yeah, I've got a feeling, well, he'll go there at some point, won't he? Because he's going to cover every single city in the world by the time that Bond is finished. But yeah, no, I think it's got to be done in the next sort of 3 or 4 Bond films, I think, at some point.
Absolutely.
So, cool.
So there we go. So today we're going to be talking about Diamonds Are Forever. We're gonna be doing the full movie review and closing the chapter on Sean Connery's tenure as Bond. Obviously, we've already done Never Say Never Again, so
we have indeed. So
they're all in the bag after this one.
Yeah.
So are you excited about that?
I am indeed, yeah, because it'd been. Diamonds is one of those ones where it kind of divides people between those that like it and those that don't, and I kind of knew how I felt before, so it was interesting to have that going into watching the film again.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we crack on then, make sure you come and join us on Facebook. You can just put James Bond Radio into the Facebook search. Also come and join us on Twitter, which is at James Bond Radio. And also, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a lovely 5-star glowing review on iTunes, that's a big help to us as well. So if you just go to the iTunes page and leave us a review, that would help. Also, if you come to our website, jamesbondradio.com, you can leave us a SpeakPipe message. So if you press the little button on the side, you can leave us a voicemail through your computer and you can ask us any questions or leave us any listener quotes or trivia or anything interesting that you want to talk about. Which is all good fun. And of course, if you miss us in the weeks where we're not broadcasting, you can take our Ultimate Bond quiz on the website too. You can sign up and take you get an extra 90-minute bonus episode that's not available anywhere else. And you can have some fun with that too.
You know what? I think you and I should take that again because... just to see if we've improved our Bond knowledge.
Do you know what we should? Because it's been a while. It was back in February, I think we recorded that. So we've probably forgotten what questions we posed to each other. So that's a good idea.
What happens if we do it and we come up worse than we were before?
Well, that's exactly what happened to me not exactly, but when I was at school, I took maths and I got a D because I was always rubbish at counting, and then I retook it and got another D. So I thought. That's
telling you something, isn't it?
I was meant to be a dunce at maths. So maybe I'm scared. Hopefully I'll get higher than... What did I get last time? J.W. Pepper, I think.
I think you might have been, yeah. I'm sure you'll nail it, don't worry.
It'll definitely be worth a watch. So our intrepid listener, Matthew Grice, has been a little busy bee, hasn't he? He's started campaigning in the world of Bond. So what's been happening there, Chris?
Yeah, so he's got like a really good idea, basically. He's called it For Your Ears Only, which obviously we quite like. Basically, everyone who's into Bond, especially sort of hardcore Bond fans, are really into the Bond music. We've done the podcast about the soundtracks and all that, and it's its own entity, the sound of Bond music. You know, it's brilliant. And basically, as a fan, you want to listen to every bit of music that you can. Now, the trouble is with these soundtracks that have been sort of released, a lot of them are only some of the music for the film. There's very few that cover the whole film altogether. So basically, he's putting up an online sort of petition for people to sign, and hopefully, if we can get enough signatures on there, present it to maybe Eon, or just try and get it out there so that we can get the soundtracks re-released, but with every single bit of music that's been recorded. Because there's so much that we're missing out on, which is a massive shame. Really.
You know what? That's the silly thing about it. If I'm going to buy a soundtrack album, what I want is the complete score of the film. I don't want to pick and choose little kind of like compilation of that. I want the whole thing. So it is a bit disappointing that the soundtracks that are already out aren't that. I mean, look at Dr. No. That's a prime example. Yeah. I would love to hear the comprehensive Dr. No score on record. It's crazy, really. So good on you, Gricey. Take matters into your own hands and all that kind of stuff. And
I think another thing, if it does become successful, one thing that I'd really like it to do is for every soundtrack to be in narrative order. Not I don't mean like film order, but in terms of during that film, I want to see the piece of music at the start as number one on the CD and so on and so on. Because a lot of them have like end cues halfway through or at the start of the CD, and you're like, well, I like the music, but it would be much nicer so you can play it as
it's
you would. It's
weird, isn't it?
I don't know why they do that.
What I would like on all the soundtracks is it starts off with the gun barrel music, then straight into the pre-titles music. I mean, that to me just makes sense. Why would you have out of order? I just don't know. It's an
I'm not sure. So hopefully we'll get it sorted at some point.
So where do they have to go to sign up?
So there's on Facebook. If you look for your ears only, or check out Matthew Grice, and he'll be able to sort of point you in the right direction. And hopefully, we can get a few more signatures on there and see how we get on.
So you've heard it, JBR listeners. Go and sign the little petition and see if we can campaign and get some action going on that front.
There we are.
Now, in terms of Bond 24 news, we don't really have anything this week, do we?
No. Well, there's not been a huge amount sort of going round. I mean, there are a couple of more pictures from the Austria and that sort of location, in addition to the one that we sort of discussed last time. But the other, it's kind of good timing really, because we've had a few emails from some of our listeners who aren't sure about, some of them don't want to listen to the news in case there are spoilers. So what we thought is, obviously we still want to keep this going because it's a good sort of segment and some people love it. But rather than playing it at the start of each podcast, what we might do is sort of go towards the end after we've done our main review or interview or whatever. And we'll do, okay, now we're going to have our Bond 24 podcast and the Bond 24 news, segment, and then we'll play it. And so whoever doesn't want to listen to it can sort of skip that part, so to speak.
Yeah, so I suppose we'd like to throw it out to you listeners. Like, what would you prefer? We can keep things as it normally is, and then we could always say, if there is potential spoiler news, we can always just warn you beforehand and say, skip the next 2 minutes or whatever, because we're going to be talking about that. Or we can just shift the whole Bond 24 news thing to the end of the episode. And maybe say, okay, we've got a 10-minute segment at the end, and if you don't want to hear it, just literally skip that 10 minutes, and you can stay ignorant and blissful. That's the term, I suppose. So how do you want us to deal with the spoilers? That's our question to you.
So if you could let us know on Facebook or SpeakPipe, and then obviously whatever the big majority is, that's what we'll go for.
Exactly. So Facebook us, Twitter us, email us, whatever you want to do. Just get in touch and let us know how you feel about the spoiler situation, because we don't want to. I know how painful it is when you get a spoiler. So we don't want to upset any listeners, do we, Chris?
No, of course not. No. I don't want to upset myself for some spoilers. So
no. That's true. Okay, so we had a good amount of messages from listeners this week, and the first one we're going to listen to is a message from Charlie Hunt, who you might remember as the guy who left us a message about his dream playing football with George Lazenby a while ago. And he had a good question for us, and we're going to play that for you now.
Hey, Tom and Chris, big fan of the podcast. The first thing I'll do every other Friday morning is go on iTunes and make sure I download your episode. I was recently watching License to Kill, which is my favourite Bond film, and I thought that the start of it is very similar to that of The Dark Knight Rises, which was directed by Christopher Nolan. And with him saying he's a massive Bond fan, what do you guys think of him directing maybe Bond 25 or just a future Bond installment? Anyway, just wondering, keep up the great podcasts, and yeah, cheers.
Okay, so Christopher Nolan directing a Bond film. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Well, one of my favourite films of recent years is Inception. I think that is an amazing film. I love it. And I know it's Christopher Nolan's sort of, not calling card, but that's his sort of homage to Bond, especially on Her Majesty's at the end, you know, the massive action scene on the snow with the skidoos and the guns and skiing and all that. He's got a very distinctive style, because obviously there's that whole thing about Quentin Tarantino with Casino Royale came out and said, oh, he was the one that came up with the idea, which is absolute bullshit, because they thought of that before he did. But, you know, his style would have been very, you know, quite individualistic, and Eon do like their directors to sort of follow what they want to do. There's also the thing that the majority of the directors have been sort of British or Australian, New Zealand, you know, sort of, there hasn't been an American director of a Bond film. So that's sort of something else. Obviously, Christopher Nolan is British, which is great, but he has got that very distinctive style. Going back to your question in point, I actually wouldn't mind him to do a Bond film, because like I love what he does with quite a lot of stuff. I don't know. Is it a risk? Would you think it would be a risk, or do you think he'd be solid? What do you reckon?
Well, here's my thoughts on the subject, right? I think his Batman movies were brilliant, right? I thought they were really, really good. And he obviously loves Bond, because that scene in Inception, it's like watching an updated on Her Majesty's Secret Service, right? It's just the look and feel of that whole snow sequence and as soon as I saw it, before I knew he'd even mentioned it, I was like, whoa, hang on a minute, Nolan, what are you up to? And then obviously, as Charlie mentioned in the message there's that sequence in Dark Knight Rises with the plane, with Bane at the beginning, and the plane kind of dips down, exactly how they capture Sanchez at the beginning of License to Kill. And I remember seeing that with the missus and immediately turning to her and going, he nicked that from License to Kill, you know, he stole that from Bond. Right? So he obviously, like, for example, if I was a movie director, I'd be pillaging from Bond in every single film I ever did. So I think for him, like, he's obviously a fan, and he's outspoken that he loves Bond. And I think his Batman movies were great. I think Memento was a brilliant film.
Memento is brilliant.
I think Inception was a great film. I think he's the kind of guy that could, to be honest, what I think Nolan should do is he should be the guy that reboots it after Daniel goes. Yeah,
that's a good shout, actually, because he'll follow the formula, but he will definitely, without a doubt, bring something else to it. He'll have that Nolan stamp on it, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, that could be an amazing thing, because you know how Casino Royale, when that came, it was new, it was fresh, it had a different angle. Okay, it won't be a complete reboot like that, but it will have something else to it. And I mean, I definitely like to see it. If there is ever a chance, I would like to see it. Because if you think about, if you compare him to sort of a run-of-the-mill director, I'm not going to say any names, but someone who comes on, does a job, but, you know, it doesn't add anything to it. Whereas with Nolan, you know you're going to get that something special. And I remember the scene at the start of Inception when Leo's walking around in the dinner jacket with a gun. That was very Bond-like as well. And when I was watching that, I was like, wow, you know, this guy, he knows what he's doing. So big fan.
I think he'd be good. My two top picks, as we've talked about before, is him and Matthew Vaughn, who's obviously making Kingsman: The Secret Service, which I'm excited for. So that's my two top tips. I think Nolan would do a great job. And my worry is, Chris, right, when you look at the history of Bond, you get a new actor, and then their films progressively, they start off strong, and then they progressively, with the exception of Connery, obviously, but towards the end, they definitely tail off in terms of quality, right? Which is to be expected. In any creative endeavor, you always get a boost of real quality, and then you get the kind of the kind of stuff that's not so good. You know, looking at Connery's sort of last two efforts, they don't compare to like the first four, you know? And the same with sort of Roger, the same with Pierce. And I feel like, okay, so we've had 3 movies out of Daniel now. Is that what we're going to see from the next 2 films? Is that dip in quality? Because a good thing that we've talked about before is maybe that tendency that they have where they get more crazy and fantastical is the mechanism by which they can reboot it and take it back to the Fleming for the next dude who takes over in the role. So my thoughts are maybe the next 2 Daniel films are going to be more outlandish and more fantastical and more crazy, and maybe not as good as what we've seen so far. And then by the time Bond 26 comes along and the new guy steps into the role, that's when they pull it back and maybe get Martin Campbell back. I'd like to see that. That'd be my third choice, or whatever. What do you think about that?
I think there's a very strong chance that will happen, but I'd also that my heart would like to hope that it doesn't necessarily going to go that way in terms of Bond 24, Bond 25. Okay, there's still a chance they could be amazing films, you know. Casino Royale was amazing. Quantum, I know it's had its problems, but it's still got stuff going for it. Skyfall, you know, some people say it's their favourite, and there was some good stuff. There's a lot of potential for 24 and 25 to still be good film. There is the idea that it will go a bit more crazy. If it does, I hope it's done right. But it's just a waiting game, isn't it? We'll just have to wait and see, and we go from there. It's interesting you're saying that, though, because we did have a message from David Topham, who was saying that with Daniel Craig, he's now been in the role the same length of time as Sean Connery.
That's
now,
mental, isn't it?
That is crazy, isn't it? If you think about it, because Connery was 62 to 71, and Craig, obviously, 2006 with Casino Royale. It's going to be 2015. But obviously, once he's done 125 as well, you're looking at 2017, and you know that's I know he hasn't done as many movies, but that's a heck of a chunk of time. And we've said it before with Skyfall, he did look that little bit older. Now partly that was due to perhaps the character in the film was meant to be that little bit older as well, but yeah, I think without a doubt he's down for 24 and 25. After that, obviously, we'll definitely get someone else in. But,
it's funny, isn't it? Like that whole... We've gone from a reboot, Bond starting out in Casino, to 2 films later, everyone's saying he's old and past it and a has-been. It's funny how quickly that moved, isn't it? In terms of the narrative of the arc. But also, like you said, we won't know until we see the movie, so we don't know what's planned.
No, and it's the amount of years that were between them as well. Like obviously, Casino to Quantum wasn't too bad, but Quantum to Skyfall that was a chunk of time, so it has an effect, obviously. So,
yeah, completely. But yeah, so we had some more emails, didn't we, from listeners this week? We had one from Enno Urbines from Germany who wrote in, and what did he have to say? That's
right. Yeah, we had a nice email from Enno. He basically said that he was in Geneva Airport when he saw Roger Moore. Obviously, Roger frequents Geneva quite a lot. He's got a home there, hasn't he? And he must have seen Roger Moore, and first thing he thought, well, he had some sort of Bond-related paraphernalia on him. So he thought, great, get that out of his bag, get Roger to sign it. So he was fishing around for his, whatever it was, magazine or something. By the time he had got it, he looked up and Roger had gone. So that was a bit harsh. He was that close to sort of seeing him. But he did have an interesting take on something else. He was mentioning that he'd like to see the next Bond villain to be almost like Jeremy Irons in Die Hard 3. Now, do you remember Die Hard 3? Basically,
with a Vengeance.
Yes, with a Vengeance. Great film. And his character basically played sort of set traps for, you know, John McClane to do, and sort of was basically playing a game with him. And Enno was sort of saying he'd love to see a Bond villain that basically just is so ahead of Bond. He's manipulating Bond, making him do this, that, and the other. And Bond hasn't got any choice. Now, what do you think about that? That's quite an interesting take on it.
That's a great idea. I think what's dangerous with Bond is sticking, like, of course, there's always going to be some level of formula with Bond, right? But I don't think you have to do that, right? I think you can use the character of Bond and put him in different situations. You don't absolutely have to have the 2 Bond girls, one who's a villain who turns to the good and then shops in the villain at the end. You don't have to have that sequence where Bond gets captured and then escapes and then kills the villain. You don't have to do that every time. And I would love to see the Bond character. I mean, Casino Royale is a perfect example of that, right? Like, let's have Bond in some different situations and just explore that a little bit more. And I think that would be great. I really think it would be great. You know, rather than just having that sort of, like, you look at the Brosnan era and those kind of last 3 movies, and it was just like Bond by numbers. Do you know what I mean? Sort of through almost, and I feel like you don't have to do that. And I think Enno's got a good idea there. With that said, I think Jeremy Irons would make a good Bond villain. He'd make a good Blofeld.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting shout. I mean, he's great. He's got such a good voice and a really good presence as well, Jeremy Irons. That's interesting. Obviously, we've sort of seen him in Die Hard and one or two other things, but Interesting choice.
I don't think he's not a typecast villain, is he? Like, he does a lot of different things. So he's not like a what's the guy that was photographed the other day who's the typical villain in every film?
Mark Strong,
that was it. Yeah, it's not like him.
No.
So yeah, it's weird, isn't it? The Bond 24 news has gone dark all of a sudden, is it? There was loads of little leaks and little tidbits flying around. But and also as well, like with the whole Dave Bautista news, that hasn't been officially confirmed yet. You know, that was a leak, so it's still my gut feeling tells me he has been cast, but we still don't know 100% yet. But yeah, good call, Enno. Some good ideas there.
And we also had another email from Tim Haxton. Now, Tim was a man after my own heart, really. He was sort of saying one thing that he'd love to see, which I would absolutely love to see, and I sort of thought about as well previously, is to see Bond merchandise surrounding the sort of companies and corporations that you see within the Bond films. So sort of, you could have Universal Exports, you could have Spectre, Auric Enterprises, White Tektronix, Stromberg Shipping Line, Drax Corporation, Zorin Industries, Carver Media Group, King Industries, Quantum, Green Planet, etc., etc. There's a load of them. But, that could be done really well. I remember Swatch Watch did a line in Bond Villains, and a couple of them had like Zorin Industries on it, or Drax Corporation, and you just see it and you're like, oh man, that's awesome. That's so good. If you see the sort of company name and the logos, I think that'll go really well. And, I'd certainly be up for getting a T-shirt or whatever it might be, or a watch or something.
Do you know what's funny? I think with Bond, like there's like, I mean, these movies and the tie-ins and all that must make an absolute killing, right? But I feel like there's a lot of room in terms of merchandise for them to really make some cool stuff, and they just don't. Like, for example, I tagged along with a friend to like one of those Comic-Con events over here, like I think it might have been 2 years ago now, and it was mainly like superhero stuff, and like we said before, comics have never really been a thing that I've been into, but I just went along for the sake of the experience, and I thought, I wonder if there's going to be any Bond stuff there, and there was like one poster of Skyfall, and that was it. And I'm thinking, man, like, there was so much, like, if you were, say, a fan of Batman or Spider-Man, for example, there was so much stuff for you to, like, look at and buy and merchandise and stuff. And there's nothing like that for Bond. Do you know what I mean?
No.
It's like if you're a Star Wars geek, there's that big yearly convention that everybody goes to, and there's so much stuff going on. And there's nothing like that for Bond, which is such a shame. Like, I feel like there's so much room for merchandise and stuff like that. I would love a Drax Industries t-shirt or an Auric Enterprises t-shirt. Do you know what I mean? I'd wear that shit all the time.
I think the thing is, they've got their actual Bond character, they've got the 007 logo, and that's what they're merchandising. They're merchandising Bond. But there's this whole other world, this sort of artificial world which people know from the movies, but there's so much that you could mine from that. And I think it will happen eventually, because word will get through, and then they'll be like, cha-ching, and then they'll start playing them out. But, sooner rather than later, and that'd be pretty decent.
You would have thought, man, that the amount of money that is ready to be made with that kind of stuff, like, it's crazy that they haven't kind of done that already. But
maybe you and I should like throw some designs and then send it off and see what we think.
There we go. We'll get another cease and desist and never contact us again message.
Yeah, exactly.
But there we go. But thank you, Tim Haxton, for that. Now, you may remember from a previous episode, JBR listener Simon Woolley left us a message with his trivia question linking the British sitcom Fawlty Towers with Bond. So let's just play the original question first, and then we'll play his answer, which he also sent in straight after.
Got a trivia question for you and all the other listeners out there, which I think you'll enjoy. You need to cast your mind back to the early 1970s and the classic sitcom Fawlty Towers. The question is this: which Fawlty Towers actors with speaking parts had speaking parts also in Bond movies?
Okay, so that's the question. And how did you do with that, Chris? Did you get them all? I must admit, I'm not that familiar with Fawlty Towers. So
well, I managed to get 3 definites, and I knew there was a 4th one. I didn't. Now, as soon as I sort of heard the 4th one, straight away I pictured the character in the Bond film in Octopussy. But I did get 3 out of 4, which is not too bad. But yeah, I hadn't seen them for a little while. But it's good question though. It's
Okay.
nice little question.
Well, as I say, Simon was kind enough to send in his answer, and you might remember I commented on his wonderful speaking voice in the last episode, and he pulled it out of the bag again for us. So here's Simon again with his answer.
Good morning, James Bond Radio. Simon Woolley again with the answers to the Fawlty Towers trivia quiz. I'll try and put on my best, beautiful speaking voice. That's something that a lot of lovely ladies say to me quite regularly, but never before a gentleman. Actually, it's the first time anyone's ever said that to me, so thanks for that. Okay, here we go. The easy one. John Cleese, Basil Fawlty, and Q or R in a couple of films. That one's straightforward. The second one, Jeffrey Palmer, who plays the Doctor in The Kipper and the Corpse, the eternal line, "I'm a doctor and I want my sausages," who also plays Admiral Roebuck, of course, in Tomorrow Never Dies. The third one is a Canadian actor called Bruce Bower, who plays the American general in the circus tent at the end of Octopussy, who lets Bond defuse the nuclear bomb, luckily. And he also plays the obnoxious American in Waldorf Salad, with the line, "I want a Waldorf salad," being the most memorable, of course. Fourthly, we have an actor called James Cossins, who in Bond appears as the ballistics expert, Colthorpe, in The Man with the Golden Gun, the guy who identifies the bullet maker and traces him back to Macau. He appears in The Hotel Inspectors as a guest with a blazer and a moustache and a bald head, who's served a glass of dodgy wine by Basil Fawlty, amongst other hilarities. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the dodgy one, which will make eyes roll and people not accept. And I've got to say, it's not a real one, of course, is Bernard Cribbins, who plays the spoon salesman, also in The Hotel Inspectors, some will remember, and has a small part as a taxi driver in the unofficial Casino Royale of 1967. So there you go, fellas. That's the Fawlty Towers Bond connection complete. All the best, guys. See you soon. Bye.
Okay, so thank you for that, Simon. I thoroughly enjoyed your message. You made me laugh. That guy cracks me up.
He's got a cool voice, hasn't he?
He certainly does. I do. Yeah. I like it a lot. Now, our other message this week is from long-time JBR listener Jack Lugo, the man with the coolest name in the world, and he had a trivia question for us, which got both of us, didn't it? It was a good question. Yeah, as soon as he posted it, I was like, he's got to be making it up. I don't even know anything about this. And then we did a bit of research and he got us. So here's Jack's question.
Hi guys, this is Jack Lugo. I just thought I'd chime in with some Bond trivia. You guys have been doing a great job with the episodes. I really enjoyed the Henchman episode, and just been doing a stellar job all around, you guys. So really appreciate it. Here's my trivia question. We all know that Terrence Young directed 3 James Bond movies, but not many people know that Terrence Young also directed a 4th film based on a story by Ian Fleming. Name that 4th film, and also name the Bond henchman who appears in this 4th film, the actor who had played a Bond henchman. So thanks very much, and I'll keep listening and keep up the good work.
So that got us, didn't it, Chris?
It did, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it's one where you have to do a little bit of research. I certainly did. But great question, though. And interesting as well, because obviously it's not something that's you hear about all that often. Really.
Well, it's something I'd never heard of. My brain immediately went to Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Yeah.
And I thought, and then I looked that up and I was like, well, it wasn't Terrence Young. So, I didn't even know there was another Fleming story that had been made into a film. So interesting. I think that's going to be some homework listening for us,
and worth watching the film maybe as well.
And worth watching the film, but obviously we'll get Jack to reveal the answer to that question next time, and then we can all go on a little watch and see how that goes. But yeah, some fresh Fleming material that neither of us was aware of. That's a magical thing. Okay, so it's time for the Bond trivia round. I've got a good question for you this time.
Have you?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I'm going to let you go first, though.
Are you sure? Even though you've got a good question?
Even though.
Okay. You've got a good question. Now, I'm going to be a bit cheeky because I've got 2 trivia questions this time. One of them, I think you'll get straight away. The other one is a thinker, and I think you'll probably get it by the end of the podcast. But we'll see. Okay, so I'll start with the easy question first. So, in Diamonds Are Forever, what is the book that Mrs. Whistler uses to hide the diamonds that she smuggles?
That is a good question, and I don't know the answer to it. I can see the book in my mind, but I don't know what's written on it. That's a good one. I like that.
That's a good one. Okay, and trivia part 2 is, in which Bond films is this either depicted or mentioned about a circus?
In which Bond films is depicted or mentioned a circus?
Yeah.
Well, I can think of 2. Is there more than 2?
I'm not going to say.
Oh, he's playing hardball this week. All right.
Yeah.
My question to you, Chris, is how many carats rough is the Akbar Shah?
That's brilliant. I've got the same face as Bond when I was listening to that bit, just like,
you already know. You don't even need to listen to know. There we go. So
cool.
we will reveal the answer to those questions at some point during today's episode. So let's crack on with the film review. So as we always do before we talk about the films, let's talk a little bit about our perceptions before we watched it and all that kind of stuff. So Diamonds Are Forever, for you, how did you feel before this viewing?
Well, before, I have to admit, going in, it was never one of my sort of favourite Bond films. It was Connery, you could tell he was a little bit older. The film was a lot more towards the humorous side, and Following Majesties, is a big change from that film to the previous film. But I did go in with fresh eyes. I did go in and think to myself, right, I am going to take as much as I can get out of this film, and I'm going to enjoy it. And it is kind of hard, like with the JBR listeners, when we're watching the films, to review them, it is a different experience to watching them just to enjoy them, because you do have to analyze certain bits, and in doing so, you don't sometimes get the fulfillment that you would if you were just watching it for pleasure. So there is that aspect that we have to take into account. But overall, it was an interesting sort of experience, I think. What about yourself?
Yeah, for me, I'd like one thing. Do you know one thing that's come up in a couple of the reviews that's been left on iTunes is they would say this is a great podcast, but the hosts sometimes say that they're not familiar with a certain Bond film or they haven't watched it in a while, and they felt that we should have watched through all the films before we started the podcast. But for me, that's what this podcast is all about, is us rediscovering all these movies one by one and then reporting our thoughts on them and what we felt before and what we felt after them. And I sometimes feel when you revisit a movie that you haven't seen for a long time, your opinions of it can be wildly different to what Never Say Never Again was a perfect example of that. Both of us were like, whoa, I'm never say never again. Then we watched it and we were like, it's actually a solid film, dodgy at the end, but otherwise a solid film. Now, Diamonds for me has always been tainted with that thing of like, man, missed opportunity. Honor Majesties was so amazing. Imagine what could have been. But when I look at it, and when I watched it yesterday, I was like, to me, this is the natural successor to You Only Live Twice, in the sense of that film was going over the top, sort of more fantastical, hollowed out volcanoes, spaceships eating each other and all that kind of stuff. For me, what they've clearly done is just completely ignored Honor Majesties even happened. And this is like the stepping stone from You Only Live Twice to Diamonds. Like, even in the way it looks, some of those sets, obviously it's not Ken Adam, which we'll talk about more later, but even some of those sets had that You Only Live Twice kind of feel to it.
That's funny, because I wrote that on some of my notes when I was watching it.
Interesting. So it's a kind of a funny one. So the way I'm kind of looking at this, there's so many different ways you could look at this. And for me, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go with the way it was intended. And as much as it pains me, let's pretend Honor Majesties isn't there. and let's say we've gone from You Only Live Twice to Diamonds and look at it in that context.
Yeah,
because
I think that's the best way to do it. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just going to be me and you sitting here and going, Majesty, for 2.5 hours or whatever it's going to be. But you know what I mean? So that's the kind of the lens I'm looking at it through, as you know, either the follow up to You Only Live Twice or its own standalone movie. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way of doing it. And the fact that if you sort of just follow that off, You Only Live Twice, it does make more sense as a film, doesn't it? So I think that's definitely the best way to do it. It's particularly with the whole dead wife Blofeld angle. You know, definitely makes a lot more sense to do
completely.
that. So
so this time around, we've got Guy Hamilton back. He's back in the saddle.
Yeah,
we've got a script by Richard Maybaum. And we've got the first time we've seen a script from Tom Mankiewicz. Yeah. Now, Tom Mankiewicz, remember when I mentioned I met Richard Keel that time at that Q&A?
Oh, really? Did you? I don't remember that.
I don't know whether I mentioned that before. But on that same panel was Tom Mankiewicz, and he was so interesting to listen to. Like he was such a fun kind of storyteller, and he had some amazing stories about his days on Bond and stuff. And obviously he was involved with loads of classic stuff, wasn't he? He was I think he was involved in Superman and some of those movies. And I think as for my understanding of what he said is that he's the one that was responsible for a lot of the one-liners and a lot of the jokes. And I do feel like that's probably one of the strengths of this movie is the dialogue in there.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So Guy Hamilton back. Obviously, he was responsible for Goldfinger. Richard Maybaum, classic Bond scribe, and a bit of new blood with Tom Mankiewicz. So should we talk about the actual film itself?
I think we better do.
Let's do it. So we got a gun barrel.
Yeah.
Now, what do you notice about the gun barrel?
Well, I noticed Sean is wearing a hat, similar to George. I noticed that he's still doing his stick out the wobbly leg routine, and when he actually does the shot, his hand wobbles because his leg's wobbling. And for me, that's just not good enough. It's just like, come on, stick a solid shot on it, But there we are.
It's funny, isn't it? Like we talked about this. I can't remember which episode, but we talked about the gun barrels, didn't we? Yeah. And for me, Connery being the ultimate Bond that he is, I think he's got one of the weakest gun barrels, to be honest with you.
I think really do.
Like that wobbly leg. If you're shooting a gun at somebody, you need to be planted into the ground firm and strong. And he is way too wobbly for me, but and for you as well.
One thing that I did like though is the music cue over the gun barrel is different to what we've heard before. A lot of them are specific to those films, and I do like the Diamonds sort of gun barrel music. It's pretty cool.
Now, one of the first things I noticed watching the opening scenes is obviously Bond's on the hunt for Blofeld, right?
Yeah.
And they do the same thing they do at the beginning of Dr. No and they do at the beginning of Honor Majesty's, where you don't see Bond's face. You just see his hands in shot, like around somebody's throat and all that kind of stuff, or holding the collar. And then, which I love that, right? I especially love it when they do it with a new Bond and it's the new guy, and I love that shit, right? But for me with this, the actual shot where he's revealed isn't particularly good. Like he's wearing some rubbish flannel shirt, strolling down the stairs to strangle the girl, and it's like, man, that's a nice way to set it up. And obviously, if you take it in context of Connery's back after a long break, it's a kind of nice way to bring him back in. But when you finally see the reveal, he sort of looks a bit like he looks like somebody's dad walking down the stairs. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't look like a deadly spy that you'd be scared of. It feels like that was almost like an afterthought. What do you think about that?
Well, I've got quite a few opinions on this pre-title sequence. Firstly, I'm going to start with the first two scenes. So the first one you see is in sort of supposedly Japan. You see a Japanese-looking screen. Some guy gets chucked through. You see a pair of hands. And then you've got the worst dubbing in the whole of the Bond series. Cairo! And he doesn't even move his mouth. And that was appalling. And then the second one, you see this guy with a big fez doing roulette table at the casino. Hit me! And then he gets punched. Now, that is the thing is, right, the reason that you don't see Connery's face in those two scenes is because I think it's not Connery. I believe that it was some guy dressed up. And the thing with Dr. No and the thing with Honor Majesty's is that it's them and they're in that same scene the whole time.
Yeah.
and when they're revealed, you've been with them. Here, you've got two separate scenes away from before you see Connery, and you don't see him at all. And I think that was, okay, let's not use Connery in these scenes because it'll be cheaper or whatever, you know. Yeah. I think it was just a random. And for me, using that not reveal until the third scene just didn't work because, I thought, I don't want to complain too much, but I did think the sets looked a bit cheap and they're not as nice as on location. You know, you want a good pre-titles on location, and these were so obviously done in studio, and for me it didn't work. And then seeing the James Bond reveal, like you said, the outfit wasn't great. His delivery of "My name's Bond, James Bond" was like really quick, and it just wasn't on
James Bond.
Yeah, it just was. It just didn't have it, and it was strange. So it wasn't the best sort of opening to the pre-titles for me, that particular one.
I think you've got to take it into account, the backstory to this movie, haven't you? Because basically what's happened is Lazenby's come in, he's been a bit of a troublemaker, he's refused to do any more, so they're like, shit, we're in trouble, let's get Connery back. The only way they could have got Connery back was to give him a shitload of money, which is exactly what they did. And they also said to him, look, we'll give you all this money and you can make whatever movie you want. Like, you just choose whatever you want to make and we'll bankroll it. So it was an offer he couldn't refuse. He was like, okay, I'm going to come back for one more and then that's it. Yeah. So he is totally in this for the money, right, at this point.
Although we do have to say that he actually gave all of his fee to the Scottish Education Trust Fund that he set up. So he didn't keep any of his £1.2 million for himself. So
interesting.
So he was in it for the money to get the money, but not from a greedy perspective, because he did use that money for something else and not for himself.
That's a very good point. So maybe for him personally, it was supporting a cause that he was into, but at the same time, it was, you know, maybe he was more motivated by the fact that he could make any movie that he wanted based off the back of that, which is fair enough. You know, that's absolutely fine. So, I mean, when we reviewed Yolt, you could kind of see that Connery's a bit tired and he's had enough by that point. So here we are, you know, what is it, 4 years later? Yeah. And here we are again. I mean, it is tricky. And I think in order for them to have given him so much money, maybe the actual budget took a hit for the actual production value of the film.
Well, that's exactly what happened. We can talk about it in a bit more detail later on. But one of the main areas that did take a big hit on it was the special effects department, which is blatantly obvious. But we'll get to that later on.
I know what your main talking point's going to be on that one. Yeah, go on, carry on.
I do have to admit that the pre-titles does throw up some nice aspects. One of them is I did a Tom Sears and I pressed the little pause button on a certain scene, and you definitely get a nice bit of boobage there.
Well, I'm proud that my name is now associated with pausing Bond films to see nipples. I'm proud of that. I claim it. It's brilliant.
Definitely.
That was one of my favourites as a youth was this particular scene, because you do get full boobage on display if you pause it at the right frame. Yeah. Maybe that's something we can do, is we can actually note down the exact time reference for these for our listeners, so they can similarly get involved and pull a Tom as you reference it. But absolutely. And that was great. If you know where to look, you can find it.
There you go. And I also thought the sort of strangling with a bikini was quite Fleming-esque, because we talked about the sadomasochism before, and that was quite, you know, the old strangling was quite Fleming.
I mean, it's like the old school Connery Bond with the towels wrapped around his fists in Dr. No and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, he wasn't shy to do a bit of slapping about in those days. So yeah.
So what did you think of the sort of plastic surgery laboratory type scene then, the one that sort of finished off the pre-titles?
Well, for me, this isn't the strongest sort of sequence. Like, okay, so you've got the mud baths, you've got, you know, Blofeld, I want the procedure done tonight, and all that kind of stuff. It's a bit of a funny one, isn't it? In the sense that, you know, Bond shows up, there's a dude in the mud bath. For some reason, he's got a revolver.
Why has he got a gun? Why has he got a gun in there?
Yeah, he's got a revolver in the mud bath. Yeah. First of all, does a gun work covered in liquid? I don't know whether if you get a gun, I don't know how it would fire, because obviously you've got to have that spark maybe with the gunpowder. Yeah, I don't know, but you've got to suspend your disbelief, I suppose, in order to enjoy it. there's that weird forward roll that Bond does to pull the chain.
Yeah, that is true. Actually,
it is a bit funny. I'm not sure about his little inner pocket mousetrap thing. Like, I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Well, I think plastic surgery has come on leaps and bounds since the days where you had to put your body in hot boiling mud.
In a bath of mud. We'll sort you out.
How is that meant to work? I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, it's a bit strange. I think the fight wasn't all that. In all honesty, I agree. The hand trap, it was interesting, but it just didn't quite work. The whole sort of Bond sort of getting Blofeld on the table and then pushing him in. It was interesting, but it wasn't quite there. But there is something that I do really like, which I don't know if it's intentional or not. But do you remember on Her Majesty's Secret Service when Draco mentioned that some of his men were defecting to Spectre, were defecting to Blofeld?
I do remember that, yeah.
Now, one of the two guards in this scene, not the one with the massive side chops and with the lamb chops, but the other guard, was Raphael on Her Majesty's Secret Service. He was one of the dudes on the beach in the pre-titles of Majesties who was trying to beat up Bond, when they had the fight when Bond...
Well, so now I've learned something today. I didn't know that. That's good.
The actor is called Terence Mountain, but you could imagine, okay, his character's not referenced, but if, Draco could be right. Maybe this guy who is working for him has now been picked up by Blofeld in the next sort of job. So that's quite interesting.
That is an interesting point. Yeah. That's the one tenuous tie to Majesty's ever happening in this storyline. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I imagine at the time this was supposed to be like, we've got Connery back, everybody. Like, check this out. And I feel like as a reintroduction to Connery's Bond, I feel like it falls a little bit flat. Do you know what it reminds me of a little bit? It reminds me of 60s Batman. Do you know what I mean? That sort of flimsy sets. It's got kind of, this sort of villain surrounded by all his henchmen. Yeah. I don't know. It's not quite done it for me, this one.
There are quite a few little aspects of this that reminded me of 60s Batman, which I'll have to talk about a bit later as well. But that's interesting that you pointed that out.
Okay, interesting.
I think in one word to describe the pre-title sequence, what would you say?
It's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad one.
It's just a bit uninspired, I'd call it.
That's an interesting point. Has there ever been a bad pre-title sequence? None of them jump to mind as being particularly bad.
No, I guess that would be the lower scale without a doubt. But, I mean, no. I mean, they're all pretty decent.
What am I talking about? I know of a bad one. I'm not even going to mention it. Do you know what? It's funny. Every time Die Another Day comes up in conversation, I've seen it several times now on the Facebook and on the Twitter, I think our Die Another Day review is going to be the most anticipated episode out of all of them, because everyone just wants to see us try and get through that episode. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, moving swiftly on. I think one of the sort of the diamonds in this particular jewel of a film is the theme song. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a great Bond theme. I think it's a classic. And when we actually get into the title sequence, what we've got to remember is we've got the dream team all working together. We've got Binder, we've got Barry, we got Black, and we got Bassi. All the Bs working together.
I like that. And I think very nice.
Thank you very much. And I think they do a bang up job. I think before I go any further, how do you feel about the visuals?
Okay, so I tell you what, Blofeld's cat gets a lot of screen time, particularly in the first part of the titles. It's there, obviously, the diamond necklace around the cat. You see him quite a lot. In terms of the visuals, they are, for me, some bits I really liked and some bits I wasn't sure, because you see a diamond necklace, you see a diamond earring, you see a diamond ring as well, like a normal diamond ring, so which might link back to Majesty's in a way. So it's kind of run of the mill. You think diamonds, that's what you think jewelry. And that kind of thing was it was okay, but stuff that I loved about it. I love the dancing girl within the diamond. I thought that was brilliant. The spinning diamond I thought was really, really good as well. And there was a lovely bit, a lovely girl towards the end who was obviously top naked, shall we say, and
top naked,
and it was quite cool because she had like a diamond in her navel, and that reminded me of the man with the golden gun with the bullet in Saida the dancer. So I thought that was quite a cool little thing. So overall, I thought it got better. Actually, I thought visually the title sequence was better in the second half than it was in the first. But the music's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. For me, I think so far, when I compare it to the other title sequences, obviously I think Dr. No was a bit of a different animal.
Yeah.
I think this, again, is my least favourite visuals for the title sequence. Like when you compare it to something like Goldfinger, Majesties, you know, even You Only Live Twice. You know, I think they had great sequences. Thunderball had a great one. For me, this one, again, and maybe it was budget things, it just looks a little bit cheaper than the other ones, you know?
And I don't think it's quite as creative either.
No,
absolutely
not. But then it is Binder, and you can't win them all the time. I think the song itself is great. It's great to have Shirley Bassey back. There was this story about this, wasn't it? Because wasn't she brought in later, or am I thinking about Moonraker? Was she a second choice for this movie or something? I
think she might have been for Moonraker, because I think Johnny Mathis was going to do Moonraker.
That was the one I'm thinking of, yeah. Okay, so I'm thinking of Moonraker. But you got a great song, like we said in the Scores episode, like that little kind of riff that starts the song, it sounds like Glistening Diamonds. Do you know what I mean? It really does. I think it's a great tune. You got Don Black writing the lyrics, and there's that famous thing, isn't there, with the line "touch it, stroke it, and undress it," and Harry Saltzman was outraged by it, saying it was obscene. Which for me, if somebody finds it outrageous and obscene, I kind of think that's probably the way to go when it comes to Bond. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that's great. Bassey's back on vocals, doing a bang up job. I think it's great.
Yeah, quality. Yeah, no, brilliant. That's aspects you could. So, what did you think of the opening scenes when we're with M and Sir Donald Munger?
I think it's good. What I liked, my favourite part of that is when M is like, he's looking at all the diamonds in the kind of the display case, and you can see in the reflection Bond's just like looking off to the side, like bored out of his mind. And then I could ruin my trivia question of the day, so I'm not going to say any more about that. But I think it's great. I think M's got his old sort of testy attitude for Bond back. He doesn't like the fact that Bond knows everything and all that kind of stuff. I think it's great. One thing I picked up on is when they sit down to have the sherry, and M says, "Oh, not for me, doctor's orders." And Bond says, "Oh, it's a pity about your liver, sir. Like it's a great vintage or whatever it is." He says. So I wonder, like, what caused them to do that? Was that like because Bernard Lee was an infamous boozer? So I wonder whether that was just like a little in joke between them or what. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting point because, well, you never see. Do you ever see M drink? Oh, you do see Judi Dench drink in GoldenEye. Because she has a bourbon with Brosnan, doesn't she?
Yeah.
But do we ever see Bernard Lee drink? I
think you do in Goldfinger when they're at the Bank of
Yes,
England.
obviously when they have of course you do with the brandy and stuff. But I think it must have been a subtle in joke there, because I'm sure there was a bit of poking fun in a kind way. I'm sure that was part of it, and it also kind of linked to Bond as well, because in Die Another Day, when they're analysing him after he's been tortured for ages, they're like, "Oh, liver is not too good. Definitely him then." So it's kind of like Bond and M share dodgy livers due to drink, I guess. So
indeed,
it's kind of a little link there. But I did like the fact that Bond has got this massive knowledge of sherry, and he's marrying the original vintage is 1851 or whatever it is. Or was it 1852? One of
I think it was 1851.
1852, yeah. And then straight after that, Sir Donald asked him about diamonds, and he hasn't got a clue. And M is like quite happy. He hasn't put Bond down, but he's glad that Bond doesn't know everything about sort of diamonds. So that's quite a nice little thing. I thought that's quite cool.
Yeah, that's a nice little touch. And one thing I picked up on as well is that I think this is the first time, and maybe the only time, when we've got the M briefing, intercut with other footage of what's happening, because it's like you have basically Sir Donald talking about the whole diamond setup and how the security is super tight, and then over the top of those words you've got the footage of the guys stealing the diamonds out of the mine and taking it to the dentist who's taking it out, and it's sort of setting the scene, and that happens like a couple of times, which I thought was a really nice touch. It was something that I don't think we've seen before, maybe even since.
No, I don't think we have, and it is interesting, and it's kind of different, but I do think it works quite well. But one thing I really loved about that is when you see that sort of montage of the miners sort of stealing diamonds, and you see that the doctor or the dentist sort of go, next please, and then this guy walks in, and as soon as he smiles, like with absolute row of perfect teeth, and you know he wouldn't ever need to go to the dentist, you get that music cue. And then we go to two of like probably some of the best moments in the film with these guys, Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd. What do you think?
I think what I just love that naughty little theme tune that they've got. They're like the Wint and Kidd's theme is brilliant. It's just so mischievous. And I love these two, man. I think they're brilliant. It's a shame that they died. Spoiler alert, if you don't reach the end. It's a shame they get killed off, because I think these are another two that could have come back easily. You know, they're great. And I think the whole thing, like, I mean, it's a bit silly, isn't it? Like when Dr. Tynan's walking away and he's like, "Oh, my wisdom teeth," you know, it's a bit like, but like I think that's a cool death for him. You know what I mean? He's checking out his molars, and then scorpion down the back of the neck. Yeah. Which, I mean, there's originally the alternate take of that was I would say more deadly, and I kind of wish they'd gone with that.
I do. It would have been awesome, because in another take they filmed, he places scorpion down Dr. Tynan's mouth, and it's just that little bit more venomous, a little bit more sort of evil. And I think that would have been great. It is a shame that they didn't go
and
with
more
that
appropriate for a dentist as well.
Yeah, exactly. It would have made more sense, but. Yeah, I did like the fact he had a little gadget though. The fact that he rode up in his bike, opened the exhaust, and then in the buffer he's got this where he hits the diamonds. That's quite a cool little thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say this is where we start to hear some of the cracking dialogue as well. Some of the one-liners, and Wint and Kidd have got loads. What did you think of this? What did you think of this particular one?
This is one of my favourites. Let's do it. Go on. You can be Mr. Wint and I'll be Mr. Kidd.
Okay, so that means you've got to start them.
I've got it the wrong way around again. Last time I mentioned Wint and Kidd, I got them the wrong way around, and I've done it again. So
I'll be Kidd then. Yeah.
Yes.
Or do you want to be Kidd?
Yes, okay. You can be Kidd.
Okay, here we go. If God had wanted man to fly,
He would have given him wings, Mr. Kidd. I love saying that.
It's just, it is. They are just a lot of fun, aren't they? They're a lot of fun. What I did think was a bit strange is that these guys are obviously they're in a couple, they're sort of in a partnership, but yet they refer to each other by their surname. So it's like, you know, does that happen often?
I wonder in the book whether we actually learn what their first names are.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Or whether it's just Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd. But that is funny, isn't it? Yeah, it's not like you would call the Mrs. like, you know, Mrs. whatever. Yeah, but it's funny. But I love, I suppose the thing about these two is that, and again, in the setting of the time in which this film was made, harking back to Pussy Galore as well, because obviously Pussy Galore was meant to be a lesbian, and they just hinted at it very slightly in the script, because I imagine at that time that's something that you wouldn't talk about. You'd keep it all hush hush, wouldn't you? Yeah. And I think it's the same with Wint and Kidd. Like there's just the little hints of it with them like walking off hand in hand, and I mean it does make me laugh, because there's such sort of over the top caricatures of that. Yeah. Like later on when they sit on the plane and he's just spraying perfume all over himself. It's just like, what the fuck.
But it's great though. It's brilliant for that, isn't it? Like it's just funny, but it's good. Yeah, they are definitely like every scene with them in you look forward to. I found
absolutely, completely. So after that, you kind of cut back to MI6 again, back to the briefing, and you basically hear what Bond's mission is. Basically, so they've discovered that a lot of the diamonds are going missing, a lot more than usual. And they're worried that somebody is stockpiling the diamonds. So that's Bond's mission, is to go and find out who is stockpiling the diamonds. So then after that, we cut to Mrs. Whistler, who's reading a little story to some kids. and we find Wint and Kid are there waiting for her, and there's a little transfer of the diamonds that takes place, and yeah, so it's kind of like it's following the path of the diamonds right from the mine through the dentist to Mrs. Whistler, and that's as far as they get at this point. So how do you feel about that sequence?
Well, one of the things I quite like is sweet little old ladies that are evil, and I like in Goldfinger you had the the lady with the Sten machine gun who's trying to shoot Connery. She's on that sort of gatehouse type thing, and similarly here we got a little old lady that's a diamond smuggler, so it's quite a nice thing. I quite like that. It's just that sort of thing. Again, unfortunately, I think this is one of those sort of sets where you're just like, it was just looked a bit cheap, and it wasn't quite there. But I did like the fact that Wint and Kid were there, and I love like Wint just giving himself a spray and stuff like that. And and I thought it was cool.
Yeah, it's nice. I think it's a nice setup, especially for what happens later to Mrs. Whistler. Yeah. But there we go. Now you kind of cut to Bond driving down to the hovercraft to obviously head over to Holland, and there's the lovely little scene with Moneypenny. You see Peter Franks go into the customs control or whatever it is, passport control, and out she comes in her outfit.
I love that bit.
It's cool, isn't it? It's nice.
So good.
It's good to see her again. And there's the whole little bit of witty banter and fighting going on as usual. How did you feel about that sequence?
No, I think it's great. I think it's, as like a short sequence, it's one of the best in the film. Just the fact that he goes in straight away, Moneypenny comes out. I like the Triumph Stag. The car is quite cool as well. Quite British car. And the byplay is really nice. And I just like, would you settle for a tulip, as the Bond theme sort of kicks in. And then it zooms in on the hovercraft, which is like a cool, back then it must have been amazing. But even now, I know they don't do it often, but a hovercraft is cool no matter what. Yeah. And perhaps not in Die Another Day for you. But apart from that.
Thank you.
That's all right. But yeah, no, I think that's a really cool bit that it's worked well for me.
It's nice.
Okay, and then after that we cut to Amsterdam, and we see they're going down a boat, and Mrs. Whistler's being fished out of the river, which is pretty cool. And then you see Wint and Kid's taking photos of Mrs. Whistler, like the dead body, and that's nice because it's morbid and it shows something else to their character. And she did want some pictures of the canals for the children. It's like, I like that. It's nice. Yeah. Again, it adds to their thing. And then the boat goes down towards the Skinny Bridge. So if you ever in Amsterdam, would you want to go to visit the Skinny Bridge?
I certainly would. That's one of my ambitions in life. But yeah, I think that's one of the cool things about Wint and Kid, isn't it? Because they are very likable, but at the same time, with the fact that they're really quite sinister and gross, taking pictures of poor old Mrs. Whistler being fished out the river, who they've obviously just killed. It's nice. It kind of reinforces that they actually are really nasty people. They're not just a kind of likable pair of whatevers. But yeah, so once we've got Mrs. Whistler out the way, Bond shows up at Tiffany's flat. He's obviously posing as Peter Franks, and there's that kind of sort of witty interplay between him. She's wandering around the apartment in her underwear, changing her wig every 5 minutes, and there's that line which I think is genius, where she comes out in the red, in her natural hair. And she says something like, "Oh, do you like it? What's your favourite?" or something. And he's like, "Oh, provided the collars and cuffs match," which is lovely. I think it's nice.
What does he mean by that then? I don't know.
I didn't really understand it.
No, but it just sounded funny, so I just laughed.
It did. Yeah, but I think that's got to be a Tom Mankiewicz there thrown in.
It's a genius
all
line.
Sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's a
genius
good one.
line. But I tell you what, for an introduction of Tiffany Case, I really like this scene because, again, we'll go about it a bit later on. The character kind of changes for me, but early on she's great. Like we said, she starts blonde, brunette, and then redhead. She's clever. She takes a photograph of his thumbprint, and then she's got the scanner to verify it's Peter Franks. And she's witty, she's intelligent, she can hold her own and stuff like that. So I think she's really good in this scene. Yeah. I thought it was quite coincidental of Q to think of the thumb skin the extra
Yeah.
fingerprint, but it worked.
Yeah.
But it's a nice little thing, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a nice little touch. I think it's cool. She's sassy. I like it. She doesn't she doesn't suffer fools. She's very sort of like, she's feisty. I like it. And the way she's sort of tricking Bond, getting a drink, I'll go and get you some ice, and takes his thumbprint and all that kind of stuff. It's good. She's not an idiot, at least at this stage of the movie. It might change a little bit later on, but at this point, she's pretty cool.
She's pretty cool.
I like that sequence a lot. So it's a funny one. Like when obviously he speaks to Q later on, and he's peeling the fingerprints off his thumb.
Did you notice what was in the background then?
I don't think I did. No, what was in the background?
The DBS from On Her Majesty's, the same car from the wedding, is in the background, and it's being kitted out with like this missile, all these missiles or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check that out again. I didn't spot that. I was just checking out Desmond. And then obviously Q says, "Oh, that Peter Franks fellow's escaped." Blah blah blah, and then Bond leaves immediately. And obviously the real Peter Franks shows up. Now, how do you feel about Bond doing that weird kissing thing?
I love it.
You put your arms around you. It's like I remember doing that when I was about 11 in the playground.
I tell you
at school.
what, let's give it a go. Do you want to? You turn around and see if you can do it, and
All right, you
and
go
I'll see if it
first.
works. All right, hang on a minute. Right,
This is great viewing for our listeners.
yeah. Sorry, listeners, but okay. Here we go. Hang on a second. Right, I don't know if I can reach around enough.
Okay.
Can you see? Right, that's as far as I'm going to go. I don't think that kind of worked really.
Well,
Sorry about that.
for me, I think that at no point did you look like you were actually macking out on somebody.
No,
looked
I
like
tell you
were
what.
just cuddling yourself.
I'm sitting on a sofa, so it's a bit tricky to try and do it.
But good on you, man. I liked it. I like the attempt.
So, are you going to give it a go? No, I'll take that.
I think I'm gonna give that one a miss, but no, good work, man. I don't think it's gonna fool anybody. Do you know what I mean?
No.
I'm not sure. He genuinely looked like he was macking out on somebody, but
I thought it was all right. I think if he gave the right angle, then it might. But interesting anyway. I thought it was good to have it in there just for a bit of fun as well. Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. The next kind of part I do enjoy. Like the you are English, I speak English. Like love that.
Who is your floor?
Exactly. Now the next part is the lift fight. Now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, so is this like, were they shooting for another train fight, like the whole Red Grant from Russia with Love fight? Like, are they going for that kind of hard hitting, kind of hard edged fight, and do they pull that off? I don't know. Like. For me, this fight doesn't quite do it for me. How did you feel about this?
I think it starts off quite well. I love the fact it's contained. That lift is tiny.
Yeah,
a lot smaller than the lift that we had our fighting.
Well, we should remind listeners on our London tour when we met AJ, who we met at the Matthew Parker's book launch. Basically, in Fleet Street, there's a lift that he took us to, which has a little photograph and a plaque kind of type thing in a frame in the lift saying, "This is the lift that was in Diamonds Are Forever," and there's a picture of Bond and Peter Franks having a fight. Now, I see where they're going with it in the sense that it looks similar. It's all sort of wooden inside and all that kind of stuff. And the photos of us in it are on the Facebook page. But there's no way it's that same lift because the lift they're in is tiny. It's like a box lift, whereas this one was more like an oblong. It was way more spacious, and it just. So I don't know who's put that up. I don't know where that's come from.
I think they probably put it as a prank, someone, and then it's an added mini tourist attraction for Fleet Street.
Yeah, maybe, but yeah, it's a funny one. So it definitely wasn't that lift, even though we had a little play fight in there anyway, just to ape the thing. So I don't know. It's kind of, I see what they're doing with it. I think it's sort of deadly when he picks up the shard of glass.
Yeah,
there's the
and
bit
I do like the bit where he slams his head into the glass as well. Bond gets Peter Franks' head. Peter Franks gets a glass. You've got the sort of suspense bit where they're going up and Bond's being held down and you see sort of the wall coming.
Yeah.
So it has got some good bits. It's almost like as soon as they step out of the lift, maybe it's not as quite so good. I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know. It's funny. Like feel like Bond's a bit clumsy because there he is behind Peter Franks, and him going to take a punch, he's going to punch him in the back of the head. His elbow is what breaks the glass that alerts Franks that there's a fight, and he turns around and then they have a tussle. I feel like, you know, I don't know. It's a bit odd. And I think when the fight comes out of the lift and you've got the fire extinguisher and all that kind of stuff, I don't know. I think it's an all right fight. I don't think it's sort of up to what we've seen before. No. Which leads me on to the kind of the next bit, which is, for the first time we find out that James Bond is this world famous person. Now, this is where it gets into dodgy territory for me, because obviously when he goes to Peter Franks' body, he switches wallets with him. So Tiffany goes to see who he is, opens up his wallet, and she's like, "Oh my God, you just killed James Bond." And he's like, "Is that who it was?" Like,
I hate that line. I really do. I have to say, it's the same with Man with a Golden Gun. There's not many people who've heard of Bond. And it's like he's a secret agent. He's not known the world over. Okay, the actor portraying him and James Bond to a worldwide audiences, but in the world of Bond, that shouldn't happen, I don't think.
I mean, I've heard them say in like making of documentaries and stuff that like Bond is this figure, and it's funny because he goes into a bar and everyone across the world knows what he has to drink and all that kind of stuff, what type of drink he has. But I feel like
that's understandable, because if he visits those hotels long enough, no matter who you are, they're going to know what drink you have. So that's different. That's different, I think.
That's totally how I feel about it as well. That's accurate. That's fine. That's there's no problem with that whatsoever. The average sort of diamond smuggler from Vegas or wherever she's from, she's not going to know who James Bond as a spy is. Do you know what I mean? It's just weird. And to me, that sums up the direction they're taking this film, which is out and out fantasy, fun and frolics, which, you know, isn't a terrible thing if that's what you're going for. This is obviously the first Roger Moore film, like we said before Roger Moore became Bond and all that. But for me, it was just like, I wish they hadn't done that.
I like the play-by card, though. The play-by card, just the fact that Bond has one is quite cool, but the way it was used just wasn't quite right. But
I think old Hugh Hefner probably had a little something to do with that. But getting that bit in there. But then, so we've kind of got that kind of fight out the way, and obviously she's been keeping the diamonds in her kind of chandelier type thing. So it's time to sort of take the diamonds across to the States, the next kind of level. So I would imagine like the kind of as the plan would have gone, because everyone who touches the diamonds seems to die, that Tiffany would have been the next one to go. She'd have received the diamonds, she'd have given them to Peter Franks, he'd have taken them on, they'd have killed Tiffany. Then when Peter Franks drops them off in the States, he'd have then been killed, and so on and so forth. But obviously that's not quite how things kind of play out. So the next kind of bit is we see them getting on the plane to the States, and with one of your favourite little bits.
Well, it's just interesting the way that Bond, he walks past Tiffany, he's looking at Tiffany, he walked past her. He goes to sit down, right, about literally 6 inches away from a kid's face who is peering through a curtain like this. And it's like the most inconspicuous thing I've ever seen. It's even more inconspicuous than George Lazenby trying to hunch in the car when he's getting past thing. And it's just almost comical the way that his face is just there. But it's followed by a really nice moment. I love it when Kid sort of sits back down and he's like, "Oh, that Miss Case is rather attractive for a lady." And you just see Wint's face, and he's like sort of seething and jealous, and while he's spraying more perfume and whatever. And I really like that. That's quite a nice little scene.
Yeah, that is cool. I enjoy that a lot. Now, this next part is where this is another thing that Tom Mankiewicz told a cool story about. Go on.
I was just going to say, Blofeld's probably a bit of a cheapskate because he has them two in economy class, which is a bit harsh, you know. If you're working for someone that must have some money and he sticks them in economy class, you know.
That's a good point. I guess. I mean, you would imagine if you're smuggling diamonds at that rate and you've smuggled enough that the British government have noticed, then he must be a fucking cheapskate because he would have, but there we go. I suppose he's putting all his funds into the satellite project. And
that must be what it is, I think. Yeah.
But yeah, so as we arrive in the States, we see Felix. Felix shows up and he's got the body of Peter Franks. And there's the line where he's like, I give up, James, wherever you hidden the diamonds. And he's like, elementary, Dr. Leiter. Which if you don't know your biology means up your asshole, quite honestly. And Tom Mankiewicz spoke about that line. And he said basically when he showed that to Cubby was like, get rid of it. Nobody's going to understand that line. And he fought and managed to keep the line in. And he said when he watched the movie at the premiere, it came time to do that joke. And nobody laughed except two guys down the front who were actually doctors. They were the only person who knew what the alimentary canal was, which I thought was quite a fun
That's
story.
quite nice. I like that.
But yeah, so it's the kind of part from the airport. Like I love the gangsters. I love them. I think they're brilliant. I love how like typical New York gangsters they are, and it's like it's a lot smoother riding the front, Mr. Franks. Like that dude.
God, that's so good. That's so good. And I like what was it? I got a brother. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. It's very cool. Yeah, they were great. I like that little journey, and you can just see they all huddling in the front, and like Bond has just squashed in between them. And, yeah, it's a nice little scene. What did you think of Norman Burton? His sort of intro as Felix.
I liked him. I think he was cool.
Yeah.
I think like there's a lot of Felixes, aren't there? And I think for me,
it's a different take, isn't it? It's a different take.
Yeah,
it's not the coolness of Jack Lord or Rick Van Nutter or Jeffrey Wright. It's kind of like the bumbling sort of Felix, kind of like a good mate, but he's not. You wouldn't take him out as your wingman to try and get any ladies or anything like that, would you?
No, Jack Lord is going to be one for the ladies. Rick Van Nutter is probably going to be one for the ladies as well. This guy is more like I can see him sitting behind a desk back at the CIA headquarters, keeping getting angry at people on the phone because missions haven't gone properly and things like that. Yeah. But I like him. I think he's a solid one. Is he the most memorable Felix? No, but he does the job. He's all right. He's up there
for
with
this film. For this film, I think he works, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He works for this film. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So after the kind of the car journey, we end up at the Slumber Inc. kind of funeral home.
Creepy.
Which is creepy, and apparently that place still looks exactly like it does in the film. So that would definitely be worth a visit at some point.
Wow, we'll have to try and check that one down.
Yeah, completely. So how do you feel about this sequence?
Well, I remember seeing it when I was young, and it did freak me out a bit. I think the music is kind of creepy. It looks creepy, that big inverted diamond window, which is sort of reference type thing. And obviously then you got the coffin and all this sort of stuff. So I think it works in terms of what it's meant to do. But something which I thought was quite interesting is that when Cubby was young, before he started producing films, he worked as for a casket company, and Sean Connery worked as a coffin pusher for an undertaker. So they both have this past life within that sort of arena, which is quite interesting. That was quite cool. But within the scene itself, I think the initial build-up is pretty cool. Whoever managed to get the diamonds out and clean them in like super quick time.
That's exactly what I thought. The first thing that crossed my mind is Peter Franks is wheeled in. Not 30 seconds later, the guy comes out with a bag of diamonds. And I'm like, hang about. He's just had to fish around in that dude's asshole. Like, how did that happen so quickly?
And how are they so clean as well?
With that said, the thing is the real diamonds are up Peter Frank's asshole.
No, they're not. That's what I thought initially, but they're not, because the real diamonds don't come over until later on.
Is that so?
Yeah,
that's where I lost the thread. Then, so when do the real diamonds come?
So basically, it's in sort of the next scene. But when Bond is on the phone to Felix, he says, Q's just arrived with the diamonds. So Q is actually the diamond smuggler. So he's smuggling the real diamonds, which probably isn't in Q's job description, but that's what he's doing. So back where we are with the mortuary, slumber mortuary, the diamonds that were, if they were shoved up his ass, which they obviously must have been, were fake ones that must have been put in there before they left to fly over to America. But
now this begs the question, Chris.
Yeah.
who put the diamonds up there? Did Bond literally pull down this dude's pants, lube him up with a bit of margarine or whatever, and like stuff the diamonds up his bumhole? Like, I can't see Sean doing that, to be honest with you.
Well, maybe he might have had a hand with it because, I'm not sure. Well, he must have met up with Q to give Q the real diamonds. So perhaps
Q did it. I could see Q doing it. He's probably got a gadget for that particular job.
Yeah. Just, what's this gadget do? Oh, it pushes diamonds up people's asses. Oh, nice.
There's got to be it. I can't imagine Bond getting his hands dirty on that front.
I don't think so. But so obviously they come over, they get the diamonds, and then they're like, "Oh, so go on. We've found a lovely place for you in our gardens of remembrance, with a nice little niche there in the wall." And I love it when he walks past Wint and Kid, and they're just putting these flowers in, but the way that they look when they're doing it, it almost looks evil, the way that they're doing that.
Yeah.
And then he obviously goes pulls back the curtains, puts the diamonds down, and then has a letter from Slumber Inc. with his payment, which he puts in. And then, as sort of in a few Bond films, he gets knocked out by the big urn on the back of the head, which I thought was quite nice.
One thing I picked up on in this film in particular is people get knocked out very easily. It's like obviously we're skipping ahead, but the dude on the crane at the end, like he just literally pulls him and he's out cold. Like that's all it takes. I love that. Cool. It's funny.
So what did you think of the actual burning coffin scene?
So I think it's a great idea, right? I've never seen that in a film. Well, certainly not by that point have you seen a film where, somebody's put in a coffin to be burned alive. I think that's a really nice kind of evil way to go.
Yeah.
But I think I've heard you mention before that you don't like the fact that the way he's rescued from that is like, but when I think about it, how else would he have got out of that situation without somebody's help?
You'd come up with something. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he did manage to bust the wood off, or maybe he managed to shoot his way off. I don't know. It's just if you put him in a situation, you have to know how he gets out of it, and suddenly getting someone to rescue him doesn't. Imagine if in Live and Let Die he gets put on the island, and then suddenly some random guy is walking along, and he's like, "Oh, excuse me, mate. Do you mind if you just untie that boat and bring it over and rescue me and bring me back again?" And that's almost like what the equivalent of that happening, rather than Bond using his ingenuity to get out of it. So for me, it is a bit late. I mean, it's a great situation, especially when you see the flames go crazy on the coffin. But the other thing, if they were going to do it as they did, that surely the coffin would be smouldering. It would look burned. It would be scorched. It would be like smoke coming off of it. And yet, Connery's just hopping out of it as if it's just.
That's true.
Normal. So that is a bit of a shame.
But I like the fact that, like, when they bring him out and they say, where are the real diamonds? These are phonies. And he's like calm and assured, and he's like, well, you wouldn't, give me the real money because you wouldn't have burned up 50,000 real dollars, which I think is a nice touch. But I think maybe the thing is I can't think of another way he could have got out of that, like in that situation where he's all kind of locked into the coffin. So I don't know, but I totally see what you're saying on that front about the escape there. But so I think that's cool. Like the way this kind of part of the film works, where there's a lot of double crossing going on and all that kind of stuff is nice. I like the interplay between this guy's double crossing them, he double crosses them back. There's more double crossing going on throughout that. I think that works really nicely.
Quite cool.
Yeah.
And then, so after that, we next see him. He's having a little bath, isn't he? Bit of a bubble bath.
Yes. I love that stuff. So obviously he meets Shady Tree at the funeral home at Slumber Inc. And then as he's chatting to, I think it's Felix, or is it Q he's talking to on the phone?
Felix.
He's leafing through the kind of Vegas magazine, and he sees
Playboy.
Shady Tree. Playboy, is it? Okay.
Yeah, Playboy magazine.
And then he sees Shady Tree doing his stand-up routine at the hotel, and that's what takes him there. Now, I thought what was nice about that is this is the first time we've seen Bond in the white dinner jacket with a dicky bow since Goldfinger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he looks good, Connery, in a white jacket. I do think he looks good.
He certainly does. But I think one thing that sort of stood out to me is I don't know whether the fashion of the time took a massive change in the 2 years since Majesty's. Majesty's 69, Diamond 71. Like, it looks almost like this film was made 5 years after Majesty's, doesn't it? Like, in everybody's haircuts, they've got the big old sideburns, they've got longer hair, they've got the big kipper ties. I love that pink one he wears later on. You know, the wide lapel jackets. It's almost like you've gone from this. Majesty's to me looks very 60s, and this looks very 70s, all in the space of 2 years.
The massive bow ties as well. Like, it does. It's very, very different sort of dress sense, but it's pretty cool.
But yeah, and I love that kind of bit where you know, he goes and stands at the back and watches a bit of Shady Tree stand up set, and he's sort of like wincing at his jokes and stuff. I thought that was a nice little touch. Yeah.
And then obviously Shady, when he goes off set, Wint and Kid go to see him. Now, this is a bit of a shame because obviously they go to see Shady Tree. They're saying, "Oh, we adored your act," and you know, they've got ideas for him, and he's like, "Critics and material I don't need," sort of thing. And they obviously kill Tree because when they come outside, Bert Saxby turns up and sort of says, "Oh, we need Tree alive," and they're like, "Oh, that's most annoying." But they actually shot a scene where Wint and Kid kill Tree, and it's a brilliant scene.
It's good. And do you know what? I watched it on YouTube last night. There's a lot of deleted scenes up on YouTube from this movie that I never knew about.
But this particular one, there is no reason whatsoever to leave it out. Like, for the amount of time, it's a short bit of time, and it's clever and it's nasty.
Do you know what my thoughts are on that? Because when I watched it, I thought the same. Because it's great. Like, one of my favourite things is finding deleted scenes from old classic Bond. And like stuff you've never seen before. And like that scene, they come down the stairs and he's like, "I haven't changed my act in 40 years." And they're basically pretending they're trying to sell him jokes, like they're joke writers or something. And Wint gets out his gun. Have I got that the right way around? I'm right.
Wint.
Always getting mixed up. He gets a gun out, pulls the trigger, and it's one of those old things where the flag comes out that says bang.
Before we tell it, why don't we play the scene for our audience, and then they can see it, and then we can discuss it afterwards.
All right.
Let's do that. Okay, so JBR listeners or YouTube watchers, here we go. Here's the deleted scene.
Shady Tree. Shady, we just adore your act.
What taste, style, and we have a few suggestions.
Critics and material I don't need. I haven't changed my act in 40 years.
Ah, but this one's surefire.
That's the oldest guy.
And this one will kill you.
Come on, fellas, a popping gun and squirting fly routine. You gotta be kidding.
Two's company, Mr. Wint. And Tree was a crowd, Mr. Kid.
Okay, so for the ones who are listening and don't have any visuals there, Mr. Wint pulls out a gun, points it at Shady, pulls the trigger, and the little flag comes at the end that says bang on it, like the old joke. But then, like, you zoom in on the gun and there's actually another barrel. So it is a real gun, and he pulls the trigger again and Shady gets killed. So the reason...
Why do you think they didn't use it then?
I think because they're going for a lighter-hearted Bond, right? If you think about the way they killed Dr. Tynan at the beginning, they've gone for the scorpion down the neck instead of in the mouth, which is so much more darker and more powerful. I think shooting a dude, an old man at point-blank range, was just too dark for the flavour of film they were going for. And not actually seeing that sequence kind of just lightens it up for the kids a little bit.
Yeah, it does. But I'd love to get an alternate version, the darker version of Diamonds. I would like to see that with the little darker elements added in. But yeah, there we go. But it's a cool scene. Still liked it. It's a great scene.
Absolutely. So it's well worth checking out on YouTube. There's a lot of deleted scenes that kind of, you know, sometimes you see deleted scenes and they look all grainy and shit.
Yeah.
Like, these look great. They're like, it was almost like just sort of watching the film kind of thing. It's cool. It's interesting. Cool.
And then after that, we've probably got one of, I wouldn't say but I'd probably say maybe the second best cleavage shot in the whole of James Bond series.
So if that's the second best, what would you say is the best?
I would probably say Fiona Volpe in Thunderball when she's with Angelo with her little blue negligee, which is almost disappearing. In terms of Well, actually, they're probably about the same.
Do you know what,
they?
Chris? I think this deserves its own episode. Really,
it really does, without a doubt. Yeah,
the cleavage of Bond, episode 26. Yeah.
That's going to be the most downloaded one ever.
There we go. So we got Plenty O'Toole, right?
Yeah.
And again, this was definitely a Tom Mankiewicz line. He mentioned this at the Q&A that time as well. And the line is
named after your father, perhaps.
Exactly, Plenty O'Toole. Do you get it? Do you get what he's doing there? I like it.
It's clever, isn't it?
It is clever. I like it. So it's kind of what I like about the scene with Plenty is, again, her character is like summed up straight away, in the sense when you first meet her, there's like this sort of chubby guy that's just lost his game, lost all his money, and he's like, oh, you want to come back for a drink or whatever, and she's like, sorry, you're a nice guy, but blah blah blah. And then as she's walking away, she hears Bond making these ridiculously huge bets on another table, and that's what attracts her over. So it's like straight away, you know what Plenty's all about.
Gold digger.
Exactly. Yeah, completely.
Did you catch the way that Bond stared at her when he said the line, oh, that's very kind of you, after she offers to help him in the craps? He basically just gives her a look up and down, but like he holds the look, and he makes sure he gets the full view of Bond. And
good for him. Good for him. Yeah. Completely.
There was one thing though. Could you understand the craps guy? Lucky lady, ladies lucky, lucky lady, lady crabs out, and you're like, what?
To be honest, I was so taken by the cleavage, I wasn't even listening to what was going on the screen. So I apologise for that. I wasn't doing my job. Again, so like, and this is one of my favourite bits. Like, he takes Plenty up to his room. He's given her a massive tip of money and stuff, so she comes back. And
$5,000 for a night with Plenty is not bad.
Exactly, not bad at all. Yeah. So they go back to the room. She excuses herself to go and give herself a little once over before they get down to business. Turns on the lamp, and our little gangster friends are in there waiting for him. Yeah. I love the line where he says, "I'm afraid you've caught me with more than my hands up." Brilliant line.
That's so good. Like, it's obviously another Mankiewicz line, and there's so many in this film, and I love it. That's a great line, and it's followed not like pretty soon after with another cracker as well. When she's like, "Is this a pervert's convention?" And then they obviously chuck her out, and then you've got to do it because you can do it really well.
I didn't know there was a pool down there.
That's so good, man. That's so good. I mean, that's just brilliant, isn't it? A great line.
Yeah.
And then Bond sort of like elbow sucker punches him, and he thinks they're there to get the real diamonds, and then they just walk off, and he's like, well, what's going on? And then he sees the bag, and he's like, okay. And then obviously Tiffany Case is there. So like Tiffany Case now has been working for, she's helping this diamond smuggling pipeline go long, because obviously she would have received it from Whistler, from Whistler, and then given it to Franks. Obviously she came over with Bond, but then she's obviously with the slumber guys as well, working on that. So she's kind of heavily involved, isn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tiffany's playing all sides, and especially later on when she tries to pull off a little thing, which we'll talk about later. Now, something that's really interesting is there's a deleted scene which you can see on YouTube where Plenty comes back. So obviously Bond's in bed with Tiffany when he should have been in bed with Plenty, and you see her come back into the hotel suite all wet and covered in water, and she sees Bond in bed with Tiffany, and then so she sneaks along and opens Tiffany's purse and has a little root around, takes out a little card, and that's how she gets Tiffany's address, and that's why she ends up in the pool later on dead, which I've often thought was a bit of a discrepancy, because why would Plenty have gone there? Like, why would she be there in the pool? It doesn't make much sense.
No.
But that bit of deleted footage ties in with that, and now it makes perfect sense.
But again, why was that scene deleted?
I don't know. Again, I mean, it's literally 20 seconds long, so I don't know why.
I don't like to sort of say bad of Bond, speak ill of Bond in any shape or form, but there are certain things where you have to, and I think the editing with Diamonds isn't the greatest. Like, I know that the two people that edited it, one of them only did Diamonds, and one of them did Diamonds and Live and Let Die, I think.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot of little editing things which didn't quite work. I mean, that's a scene which should have been in the film no matter what.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's 20 seconds. it would have just made so much more sense.
It just makes sense, yeah.
There's no logical reason to leave it out, which is a bit of a shame, really.
So then next up, we see the kind of the circus sequence with the flying Paluccios.
Circus.
So that's one answer to your question of the day, trivia question of the day.
Oh, damn, I didn't think you'd get one.
And,
did you know that the flying Paluccios were going to be called the flying broccolis initially? But Cubby wasn't up for it, so he said no. So
interesting. I wonder why he wasn't up for that.
Yeah.
So in that previous section, they're in bed together at the hotel and they kind of make a plan. And this is where we see Tiffany try and play people off against each other, because she's saying, okay, well, look, we'll split the diamonds 50-50 if you organise getting us out of town, and then I'll go and pick up the diamonds. So that's...
Well, first of all, Bond says the other way round. He says, you get the car and I'll sort out the diamonds. And then she's like, well, actually, as you're being watched, I'll get the diamonds. So she's been very clever, isn't she, at this point?
Yeah.
But Bond knows, obviously, he's fully aware of what's going on, but plays along and stuff. So
completely. So basically with that sequence, we end up at Circus, and the diamonds have been placed inside the toy and all that kind of stuff. And we've got Bond and Felix and all his buddies kind of keeping an eye on her and tailing her. So it's their job to kind of keep an eye. And those, you've got that sequence with the balloon water guns and all that kind of stuff, and the little kid. Yeah. And the two dudes that are tailing her are the most obvious tails I have ever seen in any film. They're walking about 3 feet behind her, and then when she stops, they just stand there and stare at her, and then they walk on. I mean, how conspicuous do you want to be?
Yeah, it's pretty bad, isn't it? It's pretty bad. But
it is pretty bad.
But at least then she got to try and escape into Zambora. Is it Zambora?
I think it's Zamora. I think
Zamora or Zambora. She's from Nairobi. But then he says in South Africa. Nairobi is the capital of Kenya. I don't know. He's kind of got that a bit mixed up, but there we go. I have heard from some JBR listeners who remember the scene for actually being quite scary when they're young. So you sort of see this African girl transform into this ape, this gorilla, and charge the kids, and like they were scared.
But that's how Tiffany escapes. Yeah. So you hear the voice go, "Not that way, lady, over here," and then she slips out the back door.
But within like 5 seconds, well, maybe 5-10 seconds, the others are out and like she's gone. Every time I watch that scene, I think, okay, where could she have gone? I'm analysing this thing. Right, the door's there's a big slab of concrete. She must be hiding behind one of those cars. There's no way that she could be anywhere else. So I'm like, right, which car do you think she's hiding behind? And she must have gone there, but they like give up pretty easily, didn't they? They're just like, oh. All right then.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's one thing that, when they first Bond is with Felix and they're seeing the girls spin past and they're talking about Tiffany case and Bond is about to leave and thinks, oh, where are you off to? And Bond's like, oh, don't you remember? I've got to go to the car rental. And he's like, oh, you don't think she'll meet, will you? And Bond sort of says, oh, it's my incomparable charm. He's obviously extremely confident there that she'll turn up, and she doesn't. Now, do you think he was being overconfident, or do you think he was just playing the odds just in case she did turn up?
Well, the thing is, he's given her fake diamonds again, hasn't he? These aren't real diamonds. So
no, those ones are real.
No, I don't think they are, because that's why she shows up at her house later when Plenty's in the pool. And she's like, that's why she's angry at him, is because he's given her fake diamonds. I'm pretty sure that was how that plays out, isn't it?
No, the diamonds... No, because do you remember that Teddy goes to Professor Metz, who takes it, and he actually... uses those diamonds to put in the satellite.
I think that's a different thing, because why does she come back? Why is she mad at Bond?
No, because she just comes back to the house. She wasn't mad at Bond initially. Like when she just turns up there, he's the one that's trying to get information out of her, isn't he? I think.
Let me refer to my notes. Hold on.
Yeah, because I remember that
she says to him, non-existent diamonds.
So, but the Teddy that gets picked up, wait a minute, is it a different Teddy?
I think it is a different Teddy, because there's that, it cuts to the scene and the guy's taken out of a locker.
Yeah, and I thought she had put it in there, but obviously she hadn't, had she? That was the one that had come over from cue that they must have put in there.
Yeah,
that was then picked up by someone else.
That's it, isn't it? So because she escapes out the back door with the monkey dude.
Yeah, that's right.
With that teddy. And then
that must be the wrong one.
That's why, yeah. So she comes up and says non-existent diamonds. So he's tricked her. So that's why he's so confident, I guess, because he knows he's going to see her again. Yeah.
Okay. In which case, so who put the real one in the teddy? Would it have been the CIA?
I guess that's the CIA guys. Yeah. Because do you remember he calls Felix and says, "I'm going to need the real diamonds." So they're obviously the ones who got it. So yeah. Interesting.
So they must have put it in the locker.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because there's a lot of things that you could easily miss. Like that one line to say Q's arrived with the real diamonds, I missed. I didn't pick up on that.
And the fact that he smuggled them in. Q is smuggled in the diamonds. It's like, what?
Completely. So it's kind of like, it's funny how you can easily miss one tiny little thread and then it leads you up on a different garden path.
It does make more sense though now that she's come back. Obviously, whatever teddy she had, there was no diamonds in there then. No, that makes more sense now.
Completely. So he's waiting for her at a house. Plenty's in the pool. And he says that she came looking here, and obviously that was meant to be Tiffany in the pool kind of thing, because she's touched the diamonds in their view, so she was next on the list kind of thing. So it's interesting. So this is where she's like, "You're not Peter Franks. What are you, a cop?" And then, who's your connection? Which you might remember as my quote from a couple of weeks ago.
He hits it pretty hard as well, doesn't he?
He's
not holding back on it.
He's not shy. I wonder if whether again that's another thing that's like a product of its time, or whether we'll see Daniel do a little bit of slapping about at some point.
No, I don't think we ever will.
I don't know.
Unless it's, well, not slapping, but if you've got like a femme fatale that's kind of like a Mayday or a Xenia, and they literally have to fight to defend themselves, and you'll probably see that. But in terms of like a slap to get information, I think we're well past that these days.
Indeed. Now there's an interesting little fact about Lana Wood in the pool, isn't there, when they film that scene?
Yeah, that's right. There is basically, obviously in the film, she ends up, her feet are tied to this sort of brick or whatever it is at the bottom of the pool to hold her down. And while they were filming that scene, obviously she was in a shallower part of the pool in between takes. They were talking, and people didn't realise, but the pool was sort of at an angle, and the brick was sort of slowly sliding down, getting deeper and deeper. And basically it took her underwater. And no one, initially, I don't think anyone else knew about it. Eventually, obviously, they spotted her and dived under and undid and managed to free her, because her hands were tied as well, weren't they? So she couldn't do it. But fortunately, in a way, I think she'd done sort of diving before or something like that. So she kept calm and like knew to sort of take a breath before she totally went under, which obviously helped. But scary sort of thing altogether, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm still not sure though how Tiffany, when she came in, didn't see the whole body and just saw the sort of hair. I suppose the hair was quite all over, so maybe it disguised it, but it does seem a bit strange, doesn't it?
Angles are funny when you look at me in water, though, aren't they? You could easily,
I think we can let
that one slide.
Yeah. Sorry, we are being a bit pernicious.
Cool. So the next part, so he kind of gets Tiffany back on board. And basically, this is where we see the real handoff of the real diamonds. Saxby turns up in his little minibus, switches it over with Professor Dr. Metz.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of a professor who's a doctor?
Also a doctor.
Who calls himself Professor and Doctor?
I don't know. I didn't know that was a thing. Maybe once you get a certain amount up the rungs of doctor and professorness, that's what you do.
That's what happens.
But there we go. So you get that scene at the kind of the gas station, and a bit questionable. So basically, Tiffany cuts him off in the car, and then Bond sneaks in the back door. However, there is a civilian in a car behind the back door who would have seen it happen and doesn't say a word. So I don't know about that bit myself. That's a bit, obviously the guy behind is there in terms of functioning on the script, so he can't back out.
And you're supposed to think that he's got his eyes set on on Tiffany, so he's not looking. But it's another one.
So Bond sneaks in, and this is how he gets into the kind of the sort of research kind of base, and we start learning about the satellite. So this, how do you feel about this little sequence?
I like it. I just have to quickly say that I love the sound of the V8 Mustang, Tiffany's Mustang, I think it's great. You can hear the V8. That's anyway. I'll get that out of the way. But no, this scene, I think is brilliant. I love the whole Klaus Hergesheimer angle. I think that's brilliant. I really like it. I think it's great. It's clever. It's Bond using his ingenuity. It's funny. He's learning what he needs to do. It's kind of like the sneaky spy stuff, but obviously it's not at night. It's not in the dark. But he's still got that aspect to him, and that's what I like about this scene. What about you? What do you think?
It's nice. I like what I like more than anything else is that I almost prefer when Bond doesn't use gadgets and he just uses his cunning and his skill and all that kind of stuff, and the way he just sort of strolls in, bluffs his way through that conversation.
He pretends to put that card in, doesn't he, when Hergesheimer's put his in, and he pretends to put one in which he hasn't actually got, and then follows him in. That's quite nice.
That is great. And, and I love the way he walks in and immediately uses his name when he sees Professor Dr. Metz. Please leave, you irritating man! and all that kind of stuff. And I just love that sort of interplay where he's just kind of nosing around while he's on the phone and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then I think that moment is brilliant when he walks out the door. As soon as the other door opens and the guy's like, I'm Dr. Klaus Hergesheimer, I'm here inspecting radiation shields. And there's just that moment where they just still stare at him. I think that's a brilliant little moment. Yeah.
That's great.
So the next bit is like, there's the whole sort of moon landing thing. So I suppose like when you think about it, the moon landing was in 1969. That's fresh in the minds of everybody. Yeah. This film came out in 1971. So I guess already there'd been talk about the moon landings possibly being faked, or at least the footage of the moon landings being faked. And there's those guys kind of like bouncing around in slow motion and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know whether that was a nod to that or whether that was just some sort of like low gravity training or something that they were doing to be astronauts. I don't know.
Do you know what? I'm going to go with the former for two reasons. Okay. The first reason is that how cool is it if Spectre had a hand in the fake moon landing? Like just the fact that they were somehow behind it, I think is quite cool. Just that idea that, it didn't happen and they had a hand in it for whatever reason. But more importantly, what I don't understand is why these astronauts are going in slow-mo as if it's a COG, and then suddenly Bond just sprints past them and he's not affected. But even when he's running past them, they're still sort of moving. Why are they doing that?
The only explanation I can have is that they have suits on that restrict their movement so it feels similar to that experience, because it doesn't make any sense otherwise.
I think it must have been that. Yeah, you're right.
So, how do you feel about the old moon buggy escape vehicle?
I think it's a bit of fun. I mean, it looks kind of crazy. I think I like the fact that the desert surrounding is kind of lunar-esque, and so that the buggy's going to hold up quite well compared to the normal cars. Although in all reality, the wheels kept falling off, and there's a scene where one of the cars falls over, and you just see like the wheel of the moon buggy just plocking along, sort of thing. But what I love about it, and what I wish I had one so much, are those Honda trikes with the massive tires. They're like awesome. They're so cool.
They are cool, aren't they?
And I love that bit of the scene. What about you? What did you think?
Yeah, again, I think this is more Roger Moore than Sean Connery, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
It's lighthearted, isn't it?
It's lighthearted and kind of fun. But yeah, I kind of that kind of whole sort of chase sequence, it's all right. I kind of think, I don't know. Again, you got to take it in context of what the film is. So it's kind of, it's a bit like, do you remember Smokey and the Bandit, when Bandit would drive and there'd be a little chase sequence and then he'd jump over a bridge, say, and then all the police cars behind would all fall in the river. It's a bit like that, isn't it? It's that same kind of vibe. But it's cool. I like the way how he gets on the little trikes, jumps off while it's still kind of rolling down the street.
That's cool. I thought that was very cool. The fact he jumped off when it was still moving. That was
and then Tiffany's waiting. They get in the car and off they go.
There are two things I wasn't sure about. One is that one of those trikes, one of the drivers just launches himself like 50 foot in the air to crash, and you're like, why did you do that? That's a bit weird.
What are you doing?
The second bit is when he gets back on his bike, and that whole scene was obviously set up for Bond to take his bike. The timing isn't right. So he gets on his bike, he pulls the cord, the engine starts, and he's kind of sitting there for at least a second or two, waiting for Bond to kick him off. And you're like, okay, if it hasn't worked, just shoot it again, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that bit really stood out, unfortunately, which is a bit of a shame. But it's great that he sort of hopped off at the end. But
I would say that's the equivalent of the Skidoo rider in Die Another Day.
No, it's nowhere near as bad as that. It's nowhere near as bad as that. Come on, Tom. Nowhere near.
Cool. So we had one chase sequence, and then we cut back to Las Vegas, and we immediately get launched into another race sequence with police. Yeah. Now, this for me, it goes. It's a little bit silliness territory for me, especially when they go into the car park and it's sort of going round and cars pulling out of the space and smashing. It's just a bit like you know what I mean? It's just, it falls a bit flat for me, that one. You know, for me, sequences in Bond have to have that special magical thing to them, and so many of them do. It's just that little twist that other movies wouldn't do, and this for me doesn't have it. I suppose the only bit is the up on two wheels thing at the end, but in general, for two chase sequences to have been happening so close together, it just feels a bit like, did we need that chase? I don't think we really did.
I'm glad you said that, because that mirrors my feelings exactly. Like you mentioned, Smoking the Bandit. For me, the desert chase and the Las Vegas chase is like watching Dukes of Hazzard, and it's almost got that comedy and that style, like you said, with the crashing the cars. But it's not. It wasn't very original. It's not stuff. I don't know. Obviously, it's a bit different now in the modern age, because we see so much sort of the types of car chases completely different now. But it just didn't kind of excite me personally. I was just watching it going, oh, okay, you know, it's nothing I haven't seen before. Like you said, they mentioned the two wheels. Now that's great. That probably hadn't been done before on film, perhaps. I'm not sure. Obviously, they had that little mistake where it goes onto the, you know, they drove in one way, drove out the other. But I quite like whoever came up with the idea of putting in the little insert of the tipping the car the other way.
That's it. That's another deleted moment that's on YouTube, is that when they originally filmed it, the car did come out on the correct wheels, but in the background, you can see crowds of people in the streets being held back on the street corner watching the filming. So it's you've got an completely empty street, and then on the edge, crowds of people stood there staring at the camera in the car. So that's why they didn't use it.
But in the rest of the chase, there's crowds watching the car. Like the rest of the chase, when he's doing when he's sort of spinning and skidding around the corners, all the crowds are watching them. And it could be, if Las Vegas is super busy and everyone's queuing to get in casinos, you would watch if there's a car chase, wouldn't you?
It's true.
So I think they probably should have just kept with the original. But there we go. But overall, I totally agree. Like, you know, the desert chase was a bit different because it was in the sort of desert surroundings and what have you. But the second part of the chase, I wasn't too. It reminded me of A View to a Kill in San Francisco with the police car chase there. And likewise, it didn't have it wasn't very interesting, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So we cut to the bridal suite of the White House with what can only be described as the most interesting bed I've ever seen. It's that weird like aquarium bed with all the fishes swimming around in it and stuff.
So was that hard or soft? Because some parts of it looked quite hard, like glass, and like I didn't know if it was all glass, and if it was, like that wouldn't be very comfortable.
No, it wouldn't be, would it?
No, I know they had that sort of furry bed cover thing, but I don't know. Yeah,
well,
it was interesting.
We'll have to book a night there and find out, man.
Yeah, definitely. Pop over the champagne. Do you remember what other Bond film had like an aquarium bed, water bed?
A water bed.
And someone ends up dead in it.
Never Say Never Again.
Yeah, good.
That
one.
was it.
Nice,
Yes, thank you for the clue. Yeah, I knew it was in there somewhere, and I was struggling to find it.
No,
but
that's good, man.
But there we go. So this is sort of getting on for when the actual plot is revealed, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, at this point, nobody knows what the diamonds are actually for. It's just a diamond smuggling ring. You've got the bit where Felix pops in to say hello, and they're basically under house arrest almost. There's a CIA man at every door and stuff. And Tiffany's obviously worried that she's going to end up in jail and all that kind of stuff. So now this for me as a kid, this next bit is one of the most memorable bits for me that stick out. So Bond climbs out the window, gets on top of the lift on the outside of the building. goes up to the very top. Is it me or that part where the lift comes down again and he's hanging onto the bar? Did that remind you of Skyfall?
It did completely remind me of Skyfall, totally, when he's hanging off the bottom of the lift going up. Yeah. Definitely.
And then he gets his little piton guns out and does a bit of mountaineering outside. Now that for me was one of the things I always wanted as a little kid. I remember that sequence where he's just like swinging along and like climbing up the ropes and stuff. It was amazing. Yeah. I like that sequence.
Well, I mean, for me, I think probably when Bond is at his coolest in this film is when he steps onto that lift, because he does it so nonchalantly and the elevator rises and he's just like chilling. And, you know, it's going pretty high and it's obviously it's at night and you can see it's a little bit windy and he's just chilling there and he's super cool. And then he gets to the top, like you said, he's hanging off. He goes even when he leans out to sort of aim the piton gun, you know, you're talking whatever huge drop is, that's balls, man. That shows he's got and he's not even thinking how scary it is. But I do have to say that when he does fire the piton gun, he does blink. Like each time he fires, you can see he blinks because he's a bit.
Oh really?
And I thought it's a shame. It's a little bit of a shame but the fact that he does all that is proper balls out stuff, which I'm impressed with. But one thing I thought was quite funny as well, just before back in the hotel, did you hear what his sort of name was? His alias was.
It was Mr. Jones, wasn't it?
And do you know what other time Sean Connery has played Mr. Jones?
Oh, that would be Indiana Jones senior.
Yeah, that's quite cool. I thought that was quite a cool little link. And it's strange. One other thing I thought with Bond is quite strange when they have names, like the same name, but for different characters in different films. Like Felix says that you've got Hamilton on the door. And as we know, so he's a CIA agent, but in the next film, in Live and Let Die, there's Hamilton, who's a British agent in New Orleans. So that's kind of strange. Yeah. And you've got like Colonel Smithers in Goldfinger, who's sort of at the bank, and then you've got Smithers in Four Eyes Only and Octopussy, who's Q's assistant. So it is quite strange when sometimes they use the same names. But I digress. So we go back. So we're on top of the White House. Bond's climbing up. He gets on top of the roof. Sees this little air vent thing, has a quick look, pulls it open, and then where does he end up, Tom?
On the bog.
On the bog, on the loo, on the John, on the whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I thought that was really nice. I love how like the voice of Willard White obviously comes over and he's like, oh, I've just realised something.
Yeah.
I've just realised something. Do you remember the question I posed about Bond villains saying, Mr. Bond, we've been expecting you?
I know, that's what I've written down. That's
just crossed my mind. That's what he said. Shit. And you know why that didn't register? Because it's Willard White's voice, even though it's Blofeld. Even though it's Blofeld saying it, he's through the voice changer. So there we go. Man. There's number 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is another one. I know that's so funny. I noticed that. I'd written it down, I was going to say, but no, that's cool. And do you know why the bog was sort of set up with all these controls around it?
I don't know.
Well, basically, you know, obviously Willard White is based on Howard Hughes.
Mm.
Yeah, and Cubby was a good friend of Howard Hughes. And apparently Howard Hughes used to do a lot of business from the loo while he was on the can. So that's quite interesting. And Cubby actually told Ken Adam this, and Ken Adam then designed this sort of toilet with all this sort of stuff around it.
Interesting.
So, so it's quite interesting. So Ken Adam did actually work on this film, but he only worked on certain things. So he worked on the penthouse. He worked on the, the bridal suite thing, the hotel. And one or two little things, but so many of the sets he didn't work on, and you can tell, you can just tell that it was a shame that they didn't have full use of him. I'm not sure why, but yeah, it was a bit of a shame.
That is interesting. Why there's only like a few bits of Ken Adamness dotted around. It is strange, but you do notice it. Like one of the glaring things for me is like you mentioned at the beginning, a lot of those sets look cheaper and nasty, like almost like you remember when we said when we reviewed Dr. No, it's kind of like the production value is a bit lower than the rest of the series, obviously because they had a lower budget. It almost harks back to that in some of those scenes with the sets they built.
No, it definitely does, and it's just a shame because I think if that's all due to Connery's fee or not, I'm not sure, but it's you think you can see it suffered anyway, can't you, in certain places, but there we go. Yeah. So so basically Bond goes in the toilet and he hears Willard White, And then obviously he goes through the door, and it's not Willard White, but it's Blofeld and Blofeld double.
Double Blofeld, absolutely, yeah. So it's a funny one. Obviously, his little mud pack has worked out, and he's got a double going on. So again, we're sort of we're in sort of fantastical territories, aren't we? Especially when we hear his little voice box device thing that obviously gives him the Willard White voice and all the rest of it. Yes, I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, like it's Hughes managed to do it himself in like a short amount of time. You know, obviously he gets Bond to do it in a bit as Burt Saxton's voice. So that's, you know, obviously he's kind of copied the idea. But in terms of the voice box, even if you stretch the imagination to say that, okay, this thing does work, the way that it would work would be I'd speak like this into the phone, but by the time it gets to you, it will have converted to a different voice. But when you hear Blofeld speak, it's almost like his voice is Willard White's voice, but it wouldn't be that way. It'd be him speaking as Blofeld, but the box would then change it to Willard White's voice as it's sent on to whoever's on the receiving end.
Okay, so yeah, that's correct, right? And in the same way that when Bond uses Q's device later, it's the same setup, it's the same deal. He's speaking into a device, and it should be like that. But doesn't Blofeld say it's implanted in him?
No, what Blofeld's saying is his double, so the not real Blofeld, has a transistor chip in his neck, in his throat or whatever, which changes the vocal cords to make him sound like Blofeld.
Like Blofeld, okay, that's it.
Which means that that's permanent, basically. So it's not something he can just turn on off. He sounds like Blofeld from this point on because he's got this thing in his neck, whereas the real Blofeld is obviously just Blofeld, but he's using this box, and he'd sound like Blofeld until you heard the other end, and then he would sound like Willard White.
Exactly.
So that, you know, that's basically how it would work, I'd imagine, if it was.
Do you think Blofeld used the same plastic surgeon to change to make his Blofeld doubles as he did for Mr. Angelo in Thunderball?
Oh, that's a good shout. I wonder, because it doesn't mention mud baths for Angelo, does it? But I tell you what, Angelo's ones were pretty damn good, I thought. But do you know something else that's funny? When I was really, really young, in the pre-title sequence, when you see a model with like part of Blofeld's face, so he's got like a bit with the cheeks and then a bit missing, and then, you know, there's a full one. I did think, so underneath that, was that the original sort of pre-thing? But obviously it was a model, so it didn't quite happen. But yeah, no, I think why not? You know, keep it in the business. They've obviously got a Spectre plastic surgeon that they go to.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
And maybe it was the one that uses a Dharmatone from The Only Live Twice. It could be the same one. So this plastic surgeon,
he gets around.
Yeah, he's done Angelo. He's probably helping out Helga Brandt. He might have given her a quick facelift or something. Yeah. And now he's in Diamonds giving Blofeld a new face.
Maybe that's an unused character that we haven't seen on screen that they can bring back for Bond 25.
Oh, that'll be it. It'll be Quantum, the plastic surgeon dude.
Yeah, the resident plastic surgeon. So Bond kicks the cat and shoots the wrong Blofeld with the piton gun.
But I do quite like that death. It's quite cool.
Yeah, it is a nice one. Right idea, Mr. Bond. Wrong pussy. I like
it's
that.
Nice to hear Sean say pussy again.
It is.
It
is.
That.
It's nice. Yeah. So there's that kind of that whole sequence. Now, what is so basically Blofeld makes him go and stand in the lift, and he gets gassed in the lift.
Yeah.
So
I've just got to say one quick thing before that. Sorry. Do you mind?
No.
Okay, so when they're discussing the voice box, basically Blofeld goes, he's talking about how it works. Well, he's about to talk about how it works, and then he goes, "Science was never my strong suit." Okay, two things. One, in the previous film, he was like, a scientist for the allergies and the virus Amiga. Science was a huge thing with Blofeld and the Big Fat. He was basically a scientist that could do all of that stuff, create a virus and stuff. So that's part one. Part two, that line is almost verbatim to Scaramanga in The Man with the Golden Gun when he's showing Bond around his, the base around his island. And he says, "Science was never my strong point." So it's very, very similar. But,
Yeah.
you know, if you want to be an evil genius and take over the world, a bit of science wouldn't go amiss, would it?
Especially with Scaramanga around the Solex agitator.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Yeah.
It's very science-based, you know, and he's got his big laser.
Yeah, exactly.
And, that is an odd.
I don't know why they use those lines, but anyway, there we go. I just thought I'd chuck that out there.
Well, thank you. I've learned something there. So he sends Bond into the lift. Rather than just shooting him, he sends him in the lift to get gassed. An old Wint kid, take him out into the desert, bury him in the tube.
It was good though. Sorry, I do apologise. I just got to say one more thing about the lift. It's like that I noticed is that as soon as he goes in the lift, he puts his feet to the side as if he thinks there's an open hatchway.
Yeah.
Okay. In the end, he gets gassed and you know, and what happens, but he mirrors the exact same thing in Spy Who Loved Me, and it saves his life. Doesn't it? Because Stromberg's got the lift with a hatchway that opens, and if he hadn't have done that, so maybe doing that in Diamonds sort of made him think, I better do it in
That's a very good
Stromberg
point.
as well.
Yeah, well spotted.
But anyway, sorry, I digress again.
That's all right. No, good stuff. I like this attention to detail. It's good.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so what I like about this, I say like is the wrong word, but what I noticed about this next sequence when, Bond wakes up in the tube, like there's that kind of thing where they've obviously taken him in the back of the car. They come out of that fake little rock thing.
That 60s Batman.
That's totally what I thought about. It's like coming out of the Batcave.
60s Batman.
And then again, so it's not like it's the classic Bond villain thing. Instead of just shooting him, it's like let's plan an amusing death for you, Mr. Brown.
Yeah.
And then they stick him down in the tube and basically bury him. And there's that kind of that channel cleaner or whatever it is with all the sparks.
Yeah.
Does that remind you of the pipeline
in Labyrinth?
Oh no, I wasn't going to say Labyrinth. I was going to say in that when they in The World Is Not Enough, when they're in the pipeline.
Oh yeah, in the pig thing. Yeah, no, it did. But have you seen Labyrinth? You must have seen, David Bowie, Labyrinth. Do you remember there's a bit where they're in a tunnel and there's this massive thing coming to them with all sort of, I don't know, things flying around.
Seen that since I was a kid.
It's been a long time. But as a kid, you watch that and you're shit scared because there's things flying to you. In Diamonds, what they should have done, I don't know why they didn't, is turn it the other way around. So instead of Bond just hopping on and short-circuiting it, he's got to think, fuck, I could get electrocuted. There are these wires coming towards me. And obviously, he just does it or something. But it just would have added that little bit more suspense if it was the other way around, I thought. Yeah. But I do like the look of him in his dinner jacket in the tunnel. There's something that just looked quite cool about it. I don't know what it was, but I did. Yeah, I thought it was quite cool.
Absolutely. That kind of I like that kind of sequence where basically you see the two workmen come along and they're like, the machine's broken down again. And he comes out and he's like, the one liner here is nice where he's like, I was just out walking my rat and I seem to have lost my way. But skipping forward a bit when he arrives at the
on the boat, is it?
Out of that weird tent thing he walks along the water in, at the oil rig. And he comes out and he's like, Acme inspection, cleaning up the world. It's just that one falls flat to me. It's like no one's gonna think that's a cool thing to say, Bond. Like
no. That was forced, wasn't it? Whereas the rat with the rat quip, it was quite clever.
Yeah.
There was a bit though when he's speaking to the rat. He does look at camera. He's talking directly at the camera, and because we were saying, the whole thing about George looking at camera in the previous one. Obviously, he's not talking to the audience. He's talking to the rats, but he visually looks directly at the camera. And I wonder if there is any other incident where he does that aside from.
Interesting. I can't say I noticed that. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, interesting. So after Bond escapes, he goes to see Q, and he uses Q's voice changer to get the voice of Bert Saxby, and basically kind of tries to put the shits up Blofeld, basically, and from that conversation, he finds out where Willard White is hiding in his little summer house out in the middle of nowhere. Now, I remember that. I think that place went up for sale like a few years ago. I think
it did. Yeah, you're right. Elrod House, it was called.
That's right.
Well, it still probably is called. But the interesting thing about that is, if you ask Ken Adam to design you a house like with those sort of specifications, that is exactly as if it came out of Ken Adams' mind, but it's not. It's a completely different architect. It's a real house, but the way it looks, with the sort of circular kind of ceiling and the little and the natural rock in amongst it,
it looks like it was built for a Bond film, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's great. It's a brilliant house. Fantastic location.
Yeah, interesting. So then we meet Bambi and Thumper. Obviously, Bond turns up. He's got his wonderful pink kipper tie on, and I think that's probably for me that's the worst outfit I've seen Connery wear in the whole series. I think I mean, people give Roger a lot of stick for his safari suits, but I think his outfit there with the pink tie is not a good look. It
wasn't great. No, you're right. It wasn't great.
But we got Bambi and Thumper. Now, Bambi and Thumper, they're memorable, right?
Mm.
But are they really necessary? Right? That's my question in the context of this film, because he shows up, there's a little a sort of tussle, there's a fight, and then Willard White's downstairs. Like, was that, to me, that scene felt a little bit just kind of like wedged in there for the sake of having a fight and some scantily clad ladies?
Well, there's two things that are a bit weird here. First of all, I think ultimately what was their role? Their role was Willard White is kidnapped. They were there to make sure that he doesn't leave. But they were basically his captors, so to speak. So Bond rocks up trying to look for him. I did actually like the fight. The fight in the house I thought was clever. We mentioned it before with the Henchman podcast, like they use gymnastics to sort of, and again, we've got a precursor to Xenia when Bambi's got him in her thighs and squeezing it, crushing his head and stuff like that, crushing his neck. So that was quite cool. And they use a sort of gymnastics / kind of martial artist. Yeah. But as soon as they go into the swimming pool, it's like it just falls flat. It's like all he does is like just basically push their head underwater, and you've got to come up with something better than that. And like even if you don't, at least have them try and drown him first. But the fact he just like does that, haven't found out yet. Still haven't found out. It's like, come on, man, you got to come up with something better than that. And then obviously, Felix Leiter and the others turn up, and then I think it's Thumper sort of points downstairs to where Willard White is. So I do think that, that scene, rather than him just going up, there had to be someone there, because there had to be someone minding Willard White to make sure he didn't escape.
That's very true.
So I think that scene does warrant being there. I think it could have been a lot better, the swimming pool aspect. But it does seem strange that when they go inside to see him, he sees Bond all wet, and with a smile goes, "Oh, I see you've met my friends Bambi and Thumper." But yet they're meant to be his captors, they're meant to have kidnapped him, but yet he's talking about them as if they're almost his friends, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, like his bodyguards or something.
Yeah.
It was a bit weird, that.
Which was a bit strange. But, I thought it was good. There was another strange line where he goes, Willard White, again, like, there's loads of stuff in the toilet. Okay, so we've seen the toilet with all the big things. First, the thing when they rock up to his rescue, he's on the can again. And then when they go to, like, the penthouse, he's like, Mr. White, there's a phone call for you. And he's like, I'll take it on the John. And he goes to the toilet again. But anyway, it's a strange sort of running thing. But he comes out, he's been rescued, he comes out the toilet, he goes, FBI? CIA? And Bond goes, no, British intelligence. Like 1 foot behind him is Felix Leiter and like half a dozen CIA guys. Yeah. And Bond's like, no, it's just me, British intelligence. I was like, poor Felix, man. He's helped him out.
Well, he's claimed it though. Bond's got there first. He's claimed it.
Yeah,
he's not letting anyone else take the thing.
Yeah, that's true.
So they got Willard, and then as they're sort of leaving, we see Bert Saxby do a little assassination attempt. Very short gunfight. I do like the line where he's like, it's Bert Saxby. Bert Saxby, tell him he's fired. Like, I think that's a great
line. Yeah. I thought Jimmy Dean, who played him really well, actually.
Yeah, I think he's a very likable character. I like him
definitely.
A lot.
Yeah, he's cool.
So at this point, we see Q with his little magic ring, which is a great invention. I like that.
Yeah.
Which does make you wonder what Q's been up to this whole time, just making himself a nice few quid on the side.
I was going to say, what is he? Right, so he came over to Vegas. He brought the diamonds over. So back when, within the film, about an hour ago, Felix told Bond, Q's just come over with the diamonds. So since then, he's set up the voice box. That's fair enough. He's made or brought over with him an RPM controller ring. and he's literally just been chilling out, cheating the casinos for the last, however long it's been, which is quite interesting, really. But why not? If you can do it, why not? Sort of thing.
So there's some questions about this scene, isn't there?
There's quite a lot, yeah. Quite a lot of questions.
Question number one, I imagine, is how does Tiffany know Q?
Exactly. She said, "Hello, Mr. Q," and it's like, well, you've never seen them in a scene together. The only way it would have happened is if Bond had told her about Q. But would Bond have really have said that? I suppose the fact that Q brought over the diamonds, perhaps Bond might have told her. But would he, though? I don't know. It just seemed a bit strange for me.
Excuse me. Anyway, unless there was some implied interaction because of bringing over the fake diamonds, Q bringing over the real ones. I don't know. It's never addressed on screen. So I don't know. I don't think it's a big problem. It's something that she could have known about him in passing at some point. Now, my main problem is Blofeld dressed up as a lady. Now, this is tongue firmly in cheek, isn't it? With this,
beyond cheek, I think it's right up the cheek. I think it's.
I mean, if we're talking 60s Batman villains, this is right up there as one of those moments, isn't it? Now, at this point, if you were in any doubt of what sort of angle they were playing with this film, it's completely wiped away with this moment, and it's just sort of fun, tongue in cheek, sort of like. For me, I noticed a lot of Austin Powers stuff in this movie. Like there's the bit where he gets his thumbs underneath the thing when Wint tries to strangle him later on.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And all that kind of stuff. And I mean, this for me is straight out of an Austin Powers movie, don't you think?
It's almost like watching a parody of Bond, wasn't it? It was like watching. It was like you're not watching Bond, you're watching a pastiche. You're watching like basically an almost piss take of Bond, but it's a Bond film. So that is how it felt to me.
Yeah, same for me as well. It's I suppose, again, Bond is so many different things to so many different people. Yeah. And some people love the super over-the-top Roger stuff. Some people love the super hard-edged Timothy Dalton stuff. And it's just, it falls in that camp. I mean, I can't say it's bad. It's just not my taste in Bond. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Everyone's got their own, this is what we've said before, but Bond is brilliant because there will be someone out there, and Diamonds Are Forever is their favourite. In fact, I think we've probably heard
we've
from one or two who have said that.
We've had several comments on Facebook saying exactly that.
Any film that you can think of, perhaps Die Another Day accepted, will have a favourite fan out there for a Bond film. And that is because they are all different. The actors are different. The genre and the styles of the films are different. And this is completely different to, the previous film, as we sort of said. But that's great because there's something for everyone. But like you said, it's the Blofeld and Drag is the sort of height of that sort of over the top humour, isn't it? You won't see, the closest you'll get to that is probably Jaws and Dolly getting together after the cable car crashes and they see each other. That's kind of they're about the same sort of level, aren't they? So you can try and overlook it, or you like it, or whatever. But the thing that I wasn't too fond of is that Tiffany, she's just spoke to Q, who we've kind of said, they might have found out in passing. And then she sees a cat. She sees basically a dodgy sort of, dressed up girl, and she sees this cat. But then from that, she knows it's Blofeld. But we've never seen those two together either. So how does she know that's Blofeld? Yeah. Like, again, as Bond sort of said, oh yeah, he carries around a white cat and likes to wear makeup, or what? It's just a bit.
It's an odd one. Like there's a lot of, for me, especially as we get into the last part of the film, there's a lot of holes that you just have to ignore and get on with.
What do you think Bond's reaction would have been had he seen Blofeld in drag?
I don't know, because it completely, for me, it sort of neutralizes Blofeld's villainy. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's sort of like, it just makes him look ridiculous. It's not like go on.
Or, no, sorry, go on after you.
No, I'd finished. Go on.
I was going to say, conversely, maybe it makes him so warped that he's even crazier by doing it.
Maybe.
Perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an odd one. But there we go. So it's kind of like after that kind of point, we've got, I know what you consider to be the pinnacle of special effects in all of movie history, which is the kind of the outer space scenes with the satellite and all that kind of stuff. I know you're a big fan of that.
Well, I'm a huge fan actually of the music cue that goes along with it. Yeah. I think it's one of the best cues in the whole soundtrack, and perhaps one of the ones in the whole series. I think it's brilliant. The music that Barry does for Diamonds is outstanding, and this particular scene, this particular piece of music is fantastic. The scene itself is okay. So the satellite. It looks like a 6-year-old could have done a better job. It just looks flimsy. It looks dodgy. In the effects where you see it in space, it suddenly just stops. And that doesn't work. Then you've got this crummy little laser. Then you've got its targets, which suddenly glow red and then have a crummiest, silly, school chemistry lab explosion that you've ever seen. And it's just a shame because I want to like it. I really do. I don't want to dislike Bond or stuff about it, but it's hard not to almost laugh at it because it is that bad. If you were watching that film with a non-Bond fan and that scene came on, and if you said to this person, "Oh, mate, Bond is amazing. It's one of the best things in the world," it's just the best. And if you sat down and then watched that scene with a non-Bond fan watching that, they would just think you're weird and mental, and just laugh at it.
The thing for me is I don't think this, bizarrely enough, the satellite doesn't bother me that much. I completely accept that it looks shoddy. Like the speed at which it kind of opens up, like when you're in outer space, you expect everything to move slowly, whereas this is like opening an umbrella or something. The one shot that makes me go is that shot of the massive rocket from above.
Yeah.
Blatantly, half of it is like a painting or something. Yeah. And then that thing where it just glows red and explodes is just to me, that's like, man, surely you could have come up with a better way of shooting that sequence.
I know.
But maybe it all went to the Scottish Education Fund instead of the Special Effects Department. Maybe that's where they cut corners on this one.
It's a shame.
But there you go. So we're kind of getting towards the climax now. So this is where a lot of the plot threads all sort of come together. They realise what's been going on with the satellite. They realise what the plan is. We get the news that the world's being held to ransom. They're going to basically, he's already destroyed all those points as a display of power. Now I'm going to destroy what's the city he's going to destroy? Is it Miami or New York?
No, Washington. First of all, he says, destroy Kansas. And then he's like, you could destroy Kansas and no one would hear about it for 100 years or something like that. And then he's like, I know, Washington, D.C., since we haven't heard from them, they're going to hear from us. Or something
there you go. Nice.
Yeah.
So all the threads kind of fall into place, and it's the kind of time to kind of move on to the climax.
Yeah.
So
go on. He's got some wicked one-liners as well. Blofeld. There's a bit where Mex is getting a bit freaked out because he's hearing about these sort of armies or whatever getting their shit together, and Blofeld's like, "It's all right, don't worry. It's just." What was his line again? It's like the great powers flexing their muscles like so many impotent beach boys. And I think that's a really cool line. And it must be like another Mankiewicz line.
Yeah.
It is quite cool, that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like everything sort of gets tied up nice and neatly. Everybody knows what's happening. And then you've got that sequence where they're trying to find him. Where is Blofeld?
Yeah.
So you've got Bond walking over to that kind of map of the world with all of Willard's kind of properties on, and he's like, you could be from anywhere from here to here or to Baja, California. And he's like, Baja, I ain't got nothing in Baja.
Yeah.
And it does make you wonder, why would Blofeld have a little model made for Baja if that was the secret oil rig? Do you know what I mean?
And go to all the trouble to stick it on the map as well. It is a bit of it's another kind of bit of a lazy
again,
area,
another one in this universe, in this world of this Bond film. You've just got to ignore all that and just go along for the ride. You know,
I do like Harry Saltzman's idea of the map being on the floor. Good though, because it's better than your usual map on the wall. He came up with something different. Let's try it on the floor with the models, and I think that's quite nice. That way.
Yeah, that is nice.
That's quite cool.
So basically, they know where they're going now. They know where Blofeld is. And they drop Bond off in that weird silvery tent.
What did you
thing.
think of that?
I think, and it's kind of weird, isn't it? I've seen similar things to that. Like I forget what they call them now, but you get into those inflatable clear. Is that what it's called? And you just like run down hills and shit and all that kind of stuff. So I guess that was an early model of that, which I guess it's kind of funny. I'm not quite sure how he saw where he was going.
No,
though.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, how did he know? But it was a cool idea. I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, but then so he's on to the oil rig. Now this for me is where we get into like it's farcical comedy. Tiffany turns into a bumbling mess. She's at good night levels of silliness.
But why did she suddenly why is she happy to just be there? I know Blofeld says she only threatens when she's threatened herself and stuff like that. But it's I don't know. It just seems a bit strange, doesn't it?
You know how we said that Telly Savalas was the first sexual Blofeld we'd ever seen because he's obviously cracking on to Tracy.
Yeah.
I don't feel like Charles Gray is a sexual Blofeld. I feel like he's not interested in that at all.
No, he's not.
What I will say is I really enjoyed Tiffany Case's outfit on the oil rig. That's really nice.
It is good.
So I don't know whether he was cracking onto her there or not. My gut feeling says he's not even interested in that at all.
I don't think he is either. No.
So you've got a little bit of sort of playing around with the tapes and stuff, switching the tapes over. She switches them, what she thinks is the fake one, back to the real one. So that's a bit of back and forth in. And then Bond obviously gets locked in that little room down below, finds a convenient bit of rope, hangs down while all the helicopters swoop in and there's a big aerial battle. So it kind of, this is a typical sort of Bond climax. There's a big group assault on the enemy base. Bond's kind of dancing around doing stuff within that. How do you feel about that whole sequence?
For me, it doesn't feel like it hasn't got the epicness of the helicopter assault on Peace Gloria, for instance. I think there's the one thing I do like is a guy that's like 9 minutes and counting. That's that's an Austin Powers thing right there, isn't it? Which is interesting. But like they had ideas of like frogmen diving off helicopters into the sea and then planting bombs around the rig, and then there is a lot more to that final scene than what actually ended up, which is a shame because it is short. There's also it's all done from the helicopter, so there's no sort of close quarters combat sort of thing, which kind of it's not you want something along those lines, really, don't you?
Yeah.
And again, the helicopters blowing up didn't quite look all that. I did like the fact of Bond being locked in the brig and then getting out, and then you see the odd bullet just ricochet off the cable right next to you, sort of thing. That almost had a bit of that was Roger Moore-esque, but it was still Bond sort of thing. But I don't know, it just didn't kind of grab me in any way.
The thing for me, like, he basically climbs up. Blofeld's like, prepare my Bartho sub.
Yeah.
And then he obviously pulls the guy out of the crane who miraculously gets knocked out immediately. Love that. Gives Tiffany the machine gun and what must be the most pathetic display of gunmanship I have ever seen in the history of film.
Yeah.
And then ends up falling off. And then there's that sort of strange thing. And what I noticed last night, correct me if I'm wrong, because I might have just missed something while I was making notes. So Blofeld's in the Bartho sub and he's like, lower, not up, and all that stuff.
Disengage.
And Bond's just swinging him around and smashing him up and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Am I right in thinking he just leaves him hanging from that crane?
Well, basically, the last thing that we see is Bond using the Bartho sub, which I think is a great little sort of transportation. I love the fact that it's a one-man sub, and if it worked for real, I'd have one straight away if I could afford it. It'd be like so much fun. But anyway, so he's picked Blofeld up. He's using this sub to destroy the control tower, so so the satellite won't thing. So the last thing we see is basically Bond throwing the sub into, using the crane to throw the sub into the thing. He knows it's going to explode, hence why he sort of dive. And I do like the dive as well. That big high dive is wicked. That's like good Bond stuff. And he dives off, and that's the last we see. We see then sort of explosions going off with the helicopter still going around, but we don't actually know what happens or see what happens to Blofeld.
So there it is. So as far as we know, Blofeld is still sat in his Bartho sub, hanging off the crane. But what makes that even more interesting is the fact that this is the last appearance of Blofeld before the bald man in wheelchair in For Your Eyes Only.
Yeah.
So obviously McClory had piped up with some hassle for him after that point, and that's why we don't see him again. So I feel like almost like we should have seen a little clip of Blofeld's actual escape. Or because otherwise it implies that he got captured after that battle, doesn't it? Because he's trapped in the bathroom, so hanging from a crane. How did he get out?
Maybe if, for instance, now like the crane got hit and the arm swung out over the water, and then say it fell down. Maybe if the sub ended up in the water, then Blofeld could have got away. But obviously, who knows? But he did, and he obviously in the escape his must have got like scorched hair, so it all fell out, so he was bald again next time round, obviously. But he did he, and the thing was, did he have his cat in the Bartho sub? Because I don't remember him having the cat. I don't believe
he did, no, the pussycat.
But the cat, the cat survived, so maybe the cat saved him. Maybe the cat then went to the crane and then managed to, help him back into the water, and then dive in after him.
Plays more of a role in the Bond series than we've ever given him credit for.
I think so. I think that's what the answer is right there.
Interesting.
But but I do agree though. The whole Tiffany, she had been a really, a solid-ish. Well, the first half she was a solid character, a little bit weaker in the middle, but then by the end just shooting herself off. That's like Mary Goodnight's butt pushing the button to open the doors and the thing, isn't it?
I feel like somebody like Tiffany Case, you start off and she's like a hardened sort of like, she doesn't suffer fools. She's tough, and
intelligent as well.
Yeah, I just feel like they sort of didn't do her a service at the end of that. They just made her into a bimbo, basically. I think at the end of
which
that.
is a shame. Which is a shame.
It is a shame. It is a real shame. So then we cut to Bond taking a trip back home on a cruise ship. Felix is waving him off, and we get that cool little music cue. Yeah, absolutely. And we see Wint and Kidd pressing their nose up against the glass, so we know something's going to go down. Now, this is the kind of the formulaic Bond thing, isn't it? In the sense that it's all over, yet we get somebody that comes back at the end, and there's a little tussle before it actually ends.
Yeah, which I like. It's a cool little, cool little Bond thing.
So there they are, and they get room service, and we didn't order room service. Oh, it's courtesy of Willard White.
Yeah.
And there's that kind of funny interplay, isn't there, where he's like, the pièce de résistance, the bombe surprise. And then there's the bit where he opens the wine and he's like got that behind Bond's head, and then opens the cork and all that. I thought that was nice. I just think they're just so funny. I love those two. And there's I like the way Bond susses them out immediately. He's like, he does the thing with the claret, but he's also sniffed the dude's perfume. So that's obviously why we see him perfuming throughout the whole film, because that's his thing, and that's what ultimately gives him away. Old Mr. Kidd gets set on fire with
I thought the sort of kebabs on fire as a weapon were quite cool. When he first got them alight, obviously he gets lit up himself then, but that was quite cool. And when Wint walks in, he's got this massive chain which he obviously uses to strangle Bond, but it's almost like a rap. Rappers had this thing where they used to have massive clocks on big gold chains, like hanging from their necks.
Yes,
and that kind of is what Wint's wearing in a weird kind of way. If you look at it, or at least that's what it looked like. It was a bit
precursor
of a strange
to the hip hop explosion, Mr. Wint.
Yeah, exactly, Mr. Wint. And then he obviously strangles Bond, and Kidd sort of throws himself off. There are a couple of things I didn't like about Tiffany Case again. One, there was her response where she goes, "Eek," and it looks so fake is a bit of a shame. And also, she does nothing. Like I know she does throw the sort of bomb surprise, which then shows a bomb. So I guess that's something. But it's just the harder edge Tiffany would have tried to do something a bit more, I think. So
I feel like Tiffany wouldn't be a damsel like that. She'd get stuck in. I feel like she'd pick up the nearest wine bottle and twat somebody over the head with it
and give it a go. Yeah, definitely.
So it is a shame that didn't sort of stick throughout the film with her. But yeah, I think it's a funny one. Like, okay, so Wint gets set on fire. Kid gets set on fire. And then Wint
gets his nuts crushed.
Gets his nuts. So the thing is, woo, and all that kind of stuff. Which just
what do you think about that? That's like
it's just comedy, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, exactly.
Chucks him off the side of the ship. Now, I think my closing thought for the last part of the film is like that kind of that thing where like they're stood on the balcony, and then they look up at the sky and they see the little twinkle of the satellite, and she's like, "James, how do we get the diamonds down again?" And then there's that whole like 80s cartoon thing where they both sort of look at each other and grin. You know what I mean? And it's like, and that's the end. And that, you remember all those cartoons in the 80s? You'd have like somebody would crack a joke at the end and they'd all stand around going, ha ha ha. Like it felt to me like that kind of ending.
That's true.
And then the theme kicks in and there we have it at the end of the film.
So do you know Sean Connery's final line that he said in his tenure as Eon Bond?
Do you know what? I didn't write that down. I wrote her asking about the diamonds coming down. What was his last line?
All it was, "Oh yes, what were you about to ask me?" And that's it. So it's a shame that it's not a bit more, a bit better.
It's not as powerful as Roger's final lines. That's for sure.
Or Lazenby's.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of a shame, but there we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what about overall thoughts then, overall feelings for the film?
So for me, I think tying it up in a nutshell, it's my least favourite Connery film.
I agree.
I think, well, if I include Never Say Never Again, how do I feel about that? I'm not sure whether I prefer... I'm not sure if I prefer this to Never Say Never Again or whether I sort of rate them more or less the same. I guess because it's official Eon, it's got a rad soundtrack, and there it is.
Wicked dialogue as well.
Wicked dialogue. I would say it outranks Never Say Never Again. But for my own personal taste, it's not a favourite. I feel like there's a lot of plot holes in there. But again, it's that thing. Is it? There's something for everybody, and for me, this just isn't my favourite Bond. It feels a bit. Sort of a little bit cobbled together, sort of just thrown together because they can get Connery back without any real thought to it. And I suppose one of the key things that you got to remember is that when we reviewed the first 4 films, it's like bang, 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 brilliance all the way through those 4 films. They're great. Then you hit You Only Live Twice, and it's the first time they've made an original story. They've just taken the title, the Fleming material isn't used at all. And this is the second time it happens. And I think you can really see that because with those first 4 films, they're fucking brilliant. And then You Only Live Twice, it's a decent effort, but it's not up there. Majesties, it's fucking brilliant because it sticks way close to the Fleming. Diamonds, original story, there's barely anything apart from Wint and Kid in this. That are, I mean, even the villain's different. It wasn't Blofeld in the book. There's so much different that again, I think it suffers for it. I just don't think it really pulls it off for me. How about you?
Stuff to be mined for a future Bond film, maybe from the book, perhaps.
Indeed, I mean there is plenty. There's plenty in there. I mean, I don't think there's been any of the scenes from the Diamonds Are Forever book that's actually been used in the film or a film.
Have to look into it maybe. So I mean, my feelings are, I know we sort of agree on pretty much everything, and this is another one because it is my least favourite Connery. I think it has its plus points, and you've got to mention, like we said the soundtrack. The soundtrack is superb. It's brilliant. The dialogue, it just sparkles, doesn't it? There's so many one-liners, and it's not just Bond. It's not just it's the henchman, the villain, the Bond girls, and Bond. They all have brilliant one-liners. which real elevate the film, I think. Wint and Kid, I think, are fantastic. I think they're so memorable. They're like a joy to watch. Each of their scenes, you just like, you like it, don't you? You got the little music, you know it's going to be good fun, and they have got that sadistic side as well, which is great. But conversely, there are the not so good points. We mentioned about obviously the special effects, some of the sets as well. You can see the production value wasn't quite there with some things, but it's a Bond film. It definitely is worthy of being in the Bond canon, and I can see how some people love it.
Yeah, I think for me, if your taste lingers more to the Roger side of the story with the more fun sort of outrageous stuff, then it would be right up your street. I mean, thinking about it, I did a little comparison with Never Say Never Again there, and if I run that through again, I think Diamonds definitely outranks Never Say Never Again by quite a long way. Like in the sense that you've got some real iconic henchmen there with Wint and Kid. You've got a great soundtrack, great song. And all that kind of stuff. I just think, for me personally, it's not my favourite. It's not one that I would put on. And one of the things you got to sort of take into account as well is how different Connery looks from then to you compare him in 62 to 71. And there's no comparison. Like in Diamonds, he looks quite out of shape. Like those scenes when they're in the bedroom in the casino, like he's got a full-on paunch on there, stood there in his wire fronts. Like he's not that toned animal Bond that he used to be. And not like you compare him to the previous Lazenby. Lazenby was in his prime in that film. Yeah. And Sean just kind of looks tired. He looks out of shape, and he just looks a lot older, doesn't he?
Well, the scary thing is, we mentioned that earlier in the podcast that Craig is now, come next year or come the next release of the next Bond film, he'll have played Bond for the same length of time as Connery, and he started playing Bond a hell of a lot older. But Craig has kept himself in shape, so he has got that side of things going for him. So it'll be interesting to see.
That's one of the things Roger said about Live and Let Die. He said in order to do the role, he starved himself and dieted like a madman to get down, because big muscles weren't in fashion in those days. So I suppose it's like in the time of what it was, you wouldn't have had like a super fit kind of muscular Bond. But I suppose Connery was knocking on at that time, so it's to be expected. You can sort of see the sort of the bits of grey at the temples and and all that kind of stuff coming in. So it's kind of it's not Connery at his peak by a long stretch of the imagination. No. So that's about it for Diamonds Are Forever, isn't it? So that's that one put to bed. That's the whole Connery era done now. We've done Connery's in the bag, and
we've got a little surprise for our listeners in an upcoming podcast. We won't quite mention what it is yet, but it will be coming. It might not be the next podcast, but it's sort of surrounding. We'll give them a little hint further down the line of what it might be.
That was a very, very mysterious statement. We've got a surprise for you all. We're not going to tell you what it is. That's about as far as it goes. But there we go. We've got Connery's number. He's going to come on the show and chat to us about his tenure. But there we go. So that's Connery's Bondian career put to bed. Obviously, we've already reviewed Never Say Never Again, so that's him tucked up nicely. So let's move on and let's have a bit of Bond facts.
Okay, so for Bond facts today, we've got quite a few actually. So we'll start with Bond fact number 1. The actress who played Marie in the pre-credit sequence was called Denise Perrier, and she was a former Miss World in 1953.
Very nice.
And she's also French, and there's been a lot of French girls, that's one thing. But okay, so we're getting into some interesting ones here. So in the pre-title sequence, mashed potatoes were used to replicate the consistency of the brown substance mud bath featured in the opening teaser. What the producers failed to take into account was that after 24 hours and under all the hot lights, mashed potatoes emit an almost unbearable smell, and the whole crew were pretty much retching as a result as they were filming it. So imagine being that dude, like in the actual bath, the actor has to sink back into the bath. That couldn't have been nice, I don't think, but nasty. Bond fact 3, during Bond's briefing with M at the beginning of the film, Sir Donald refers to Bond having just been on holiday, and M later quips how the service managed well during Bond's absence. These were inside jokes referring to Sean Connery's absence in the previous film.
Interesting.
Bond fact 4, when Guy Hamilton, this is a good one, when Guy Hamilton couldn't remember a name, he called it a Hergesheimer. Hence the appearance of a doctor named Hergesheimer in the film as an in-joke from Tom Mankiewicz. Bond fact 5, during a late 1990s airing of the movie on TBS's Dinner and a Movie, Bruce Glover recalled that the filming the scenes together, so Bruce Glover played Mr. Wint, while they were filming the scenes together, him and Putter Smith had Sean Connery convinced that they were both actually openly homosexual. Glover added that a few years later, while on an airline flight, he was flirting with a female flight attendant and suddenly heard a Scottish accented voice saying, "You son of a bitch." And Glover turned around and he saw that it was Connery, and Connery thought they were actually gay the whole time. So they stitched him up. So that's quite good. In fact, 6, Spectre is never mentioned once in the whole film.
You know what? I noticed that, right? I noticed that Spectre wasn't mentioned, but clearly Blofeld is wearing a Spectre ring, because I saw him. I saw him wearing a ring. I was like, I wonder if that's a Spectre ring. Yeah. Paused it, and it's definitely got the Spectre
it's definitely
logo
a Spectre ring.
On it.
That's good.
Yeah. So I wonder whether that was a legal thing or not.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe that was part of the McClory thing where that were the first strains of it coming through that they weren't allowed to use the name. I'd imagine that's probably the case, but it's cool that he had the ring. Okay, Bond fact 7. So there's a lot of actors here who have appeared in Diamonds that have appeared in other Bond films. I'm just going to quickly go through them. So Charles Gray was in You Only Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever. He
also Spy Love Me as the voice at the Pyramids.
That's it. So he played Henderson and the voice in the Pyramids. Very well done. David DeKeyser, who was a voice of Draco in On Her Majesty's, and he played Dr. Tynan. David Bauer, who was in You Only Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever, he was Morton Slumber, and he was one of the control room people in You Only Live Twice. Mark Lawrence, who was the gangster, who was obviously in The Man with the Golden Gun, played Rodney the gangster. Ed Bishop, who played Klaus Hergesheimer, was also the Hawaii to keep calm guy in
I never noticed that one.
Yeah, he's a good one. I mentioned before about Terence Mountain, the guy who played on the beach in On Her Majesty's was also one of the guards at the start. Shane Rimmer, now this guy's been in quite a lot. He was in You Only Live Twice as one of the NASA people. Who was in Diamonds, he played a character called Tom, who was helping Felix at the end. He was a voice of Hamilton in Live and Let Die, and he was also Captain Carter in The Spy Who Loved Me.
He gets around on Rimmer, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. I've just got a couple more. So Bond fact number 8. The movie boasted most number of aliases used by James Bond in a Bond movie. These were Peter Franks, Mr. Jones, Klaus Hergesheimer, and Bert Saxby on the telephone. So that's pretty cool.
There you go.
Now the final fact is the best fact of all. Okay, so Blofeld's death aboard the mini-sub, supposedly death, was not how the sequence was originally intended to end. So it was meant to be more spectacular with the original idea. And in the screenplay, as I mentioned before, armed frogmen would jump from the helicopters into the sea, attach mines to the rig's legs, and the thing would explode. Now, Blofeld would have escaped in his Bartha sub, and Bond would have pursued him hanging from a weather balloon. Now, that's got rings of A View to a Kill, hasn't it, when he's hanging off the thing? Now, the chase would have then continued across a salt mine with the two mortal enemies scrambling over pure white hills of salt before Blofeld would fall to his death in a salt granulator, becoming, in Bond's words, the salt of the earth. However, permission wasn't granted by the owners of the salt mine, and it also made the sequence too long, so they dropped it. But visually, that would have been quite epic. Obviously, Blofeld's in his Bartha sub, Bond's hanging onto a weather balloon, so that's a bit sketchy. But visually, having them sort of chasing each other over a salt mine, over salt dune sort of thing, that would have been quite an interesting look, I think.
So that is interesting, isn't it? Because like we said, we never saw what happened to Blofeld. So there was obviously a clear intention for what happened to him.
Yeah.
B, Blofeld was intended to die at the end of Diamonds Are Forever, and that would have put drawn a line under the whole Blofeld Spectre thing at the end of Diamonds.
Exactly.
Now, the other thing to consider is we should probably be somewhat grateful that didn't happen, because I imagine with the record of production value on special effects in this would have meant Bond hanging from a balloon and a submarine underwater would have probably looked pretty questionable. I would have thought.
Yeah.
But that's very interesting. I didn't know that. I've learned a lot of things today.
And I know Maybaum had an idea of like basically getting. It wasn't the Coast Guard. It was like getting a whole load of people in ships to try and chase them, like from Las Vegas. I think all the casino people to try and chase them or something in all these different boats, and that was weird, and that didn't quite happen either. But strange ones. So there we go. That's Bond facts done and dusted.
There we go. So it's time for some Bond trivia.
Yeah, Bond trivia. So do you want to go first?
I will. My question of the day is, how many carats rough is the Akbar Shah?
Okay, just let me play it in my head. Sorry, hang on a second.
See, really, if you were Bondian, Chris, you would already know without even having to think about it. You wouldn't even need to pay attention.
7, what did I say? Akbar Shah, 116 carats rough.
Oh, he's done it.
Was it?
Yeah. 116
man.
carats rough.
Carats rough.
Well done, dude. I'm impressed with that. I thought I was going to have you that time.
Yeah, it was, pretty much. I just popped in there. It was quite lucky. But
nice.
Okay, so Bond trivia's for you, Tom. I'll start with the first one. So Bond trivia number 1. What book did Mrs. Whistler use to hide the diamonds inside?
I'm going to take a guess and say The Jungle Book.
No, unfortunately not. Do you want one more guess? It's a very, 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 very famous book.
The Bible?
Yeah!
Nice.
Holy Bible. Well done. Nice. Okay,
I don't know why I guessed The Jungle Book. That's just the first word that came into my head.
The Jungle Book. Okay, trivia part 2. So in which Bond films is a circus either seen or mentioned?
Diamonds Are Forever.
Brilliant.
Octopussy.
Excellent. There are 2 more that I can think that I have.
Now it depends whether your definition of circus. So would, for example, Jaws in a clown suit in Moonraker is that part of this or not?
Well, you got exactly the right character and exactly the right film, but it's not at that scene. Do you remember the pre-title sequence? Where does Jaws end up?
Of course, he falls into the circus, doesn't he? Yeah,
exactly. So they're the only 3 films I could think visually where you see one, but there's another film where a circus is mentioned. This is quite a tricky one, though. This is a real tricky one.
Circus is mentioned.
Yeah. Someone used to be a performer in the circus back in the day before.
Oh my God, that's ringing a bell. Who would that have been?
He used to break chains and bend bars with his teeth.
That's Karen Bay, isn't it?
It is!
Yes.
Karen Bay, yeah.
Nice.
Well done. That's the only other one that I could think of. But
there we go.
Yeah,
that's
good
a good
answer.
question, man. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you for the hints there. That was good. Okay, so you know what time it is? It's time for my favorite jingle.
Is it time for Bond? James Bond.
Yeah. There it is. It's guess the quote round.
I like the guess quote.
I'm going to perform my quote again from last week, which I'm taken aback because a lot of people got this on Facebook and Twitter, and I thought I was giving everybody the hardest quote of all time. We've also got your new quote coming up, and we've also got a triple threat quote from listener John Wilson. He sent us in 3 quotes in one go, which sadly the first one he did was your quote from last week anyway. So that's right.
We'll listen to it again.
But
he probably did it better than me.
It's a good performance. So my quote is
okay.
Oh man, it might have been the cold which gave it away. So now I'm normal. It's going to be difficult. The name is Bond, James Bond.
Oh, it's good. Especially the second bit. You nail it. That's why so many people got it. Is because you just nailed it. Yeah,
thank you very much.
But I do think that's right. I do think that particular version of it is quite distinctive, isn't it? It's memorable. He doesn't say it quite like that.
Yeah.
Anywhere else in the films, I don't think. But so I'm going to go with Pierce Brosnan in GoldenEye.
Well done. Good stuff. Yeah.
And quite, like you said, quite a few of the listeners got that one. So congratulations.
I
to the
thought that
listeners
would be
out
the
there.
hardest one of the lot because it obviously says it in nearly all the films, so it would be difficult. But
if your performance wasn't as good, then it probably would have been hard. But you're just too good. That's
what can I say, man? What can I say? I'm going to have to start dumbing them down.
Okay, so here's my quote for this podcast. You ready? Your incompetence will destroy us all.
Ooh. Now, you know what that is? That's another one of those that I know, but it's not coming immediately. And I pretty much guarantee I'll be having a shower on Thursday and it's going to jump into my head or something completely random. Can you do it again for me?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. That probably wasn't the best sort of go. Just bear with me a second. Your incompetence would destroy us all.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now I know I'm sure I'm going to get it, but I haven't got it yet. That's a good quote. Okay. Cool. So we're going to reveal the answer to that question in the next episode. So before we move on, we're going to hear the 3 quotes from listener John Wilson. So let's have a listen.
Hi Tom. Hi Chris. This is John from Harrogate. Massive fan of the show. Keep up the good work, guys. I just want to leave you a couple of quotes on the subject of Bond henchmen. The first one, I don't know if it is a henchman or not, but I'm going to go for it anyway. And the other 2 you should get. So I'm just going to fire away. So first one is, your champagne, sir. Second one is, hey mate, watch it. And third one is, we sent her on a nice honeymoon. All right, that's all from me. Take it easy. Bye.
Okay, so we've got 3 quotes from John there. So all of them excellent performances. I was
impressed. I was mightily impressed.
That's good stuff. I've definitely got 2 out of 3. One of them being the quote you did last time, obviously.
Yeah, that kind of helped,
The other one, I know which film it's from.
Yeah,
but I can't quite place the character that's saying it just yet.
But there's another one as well. Do you know what order? Which 2 do you know? Obviously, the one I did. The first and the last one. The last one, it was quite. I like that as a nice quote there.
Nice little
so
touch.
good job there, John. Great job.
Absolutely. So hopefully, send us another message, John, with your answers in, and if we get it in time, we'll play that in the next episode. Which brings us on to the next round, which is. Guess the music cue.
Oh man, that's my favourite jingle so far. I love it. It's great.
Thanks.
Okay, so what we'll do first is we'll play the music cue from last week, and then which quite a few people got actually. So I was really impressed with. So here is the music cue from last podcast. Okay, so did you have any ideas when you heard that one, Tom?
Again, it was another one where I was pretty certain of the film, wasn't quite sure of the scene. So let's see what it is. Let's hear it.
Okay, so the film is Quantum of Solace, and it's when Bond and Camille are walking through the desert, Bolivian desert, and quite a few people managed to get it. So a big thumbs up to everyone who guessed that correctly, which is great. So here is this episode's Guess the Music Cue. Okay, so have you got any ideas as to that one?
I've got a good idea. Again, like I'm not that good with these music cues, to be honest, because I always get a ballpark thing that comes into my head, but rarely so far have I got one where I know it instantly. It always takes me a little bit of time to get them. So yeah, good work.
Cool. So yeah, anyone who listens to this, if you want to, either you can message in on Facebook or even leave a message on SpeakPipe and give us your answer, and we'll let you know next time around.
Good stuff. So that about wraps up episode 25 of James Bond Radio. So in our new tradition, if you want to get some hints on what we're going to be talking about next time, come and like us on Facebook. And on Friday, a week today, on Friday, we will send out a little hint of what the next episode's going to be. But we've got some good stuff coming up. It's going to be enjoyable. Yeah.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good. Cool.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope everyone's enjoyed our review of Diamonds Are Forever. And yeah, thanks for listening. And I've been Chris Wright.
I've been Tom Sears. And James Bond Radio will return with episode 26.
See you next time.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.